Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Mecha Mondays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Pilot Fragath, and today we're going to be reading some more of Full Metal Panic! Book 2, Rampaging One Night Stand. Previously on, in the wake of the events of the first book, Sosuke Sagara has been assigned to keep an eye on Chidori Kaname by remaining a high school student instead of always going around murdering people for preservation of world peace, basically, is Mithril's general deal. However, Mithril has caught wind of a plot by some terrorist cell, who we'll learn more about, who is doing some kind of brainwashing using drugs, and it has something to do with Lambda Drivers and possibly the Whispered. We don't know yet how much, or what exactly they're up to, what their end game is. But suffice it to say, there is an end game of some kind. And so when a kid shows up, and one of the first things they do is try to tear the throat out of a TSA agent, the local equivalent thereof, and who can blame them? I think you can, probably blame them. Anyway, they get locked up by the Japanese authorities, and Mithril hops in and is like, oh, we want to do the interview. We want to see what's going on here. Unfortunately, the terrorist cell says, hey, it would be a good idea, let's break this person out of prison, because we need them. So, this is bad, because they use an RK-92 Savage, I think that's the codename designation, which is another arm slave, or AS, the small, cute, froggy-looking one. Well, they use one of those, and they blow up a lot of stuff, including the area of the building where Tessa and Kalinen and a guy named Yang are at. I think his name is Yang. Are at. Or Takuma. Yeah, Takuma. I don't remember his actual name. We'll learn it in a minute. And it looks like Kalinen has been captured. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Kalinen's name right, because I haven't seen the show in forever. Anyway, that will about do it for preamble. I am going to have some line art to show off by the end of this, but I'm not going to be able to do it until... No, Takuma is the name of the kid that tried to bite a dude's throat out. That's what it was. Next week's going to be thrilling if I can do it all in one go. It's going to be a fair amount of reading. I will have some line art for that one, though. I won't have any for this week, I don't think. With that, let's get rocking. Two. The baton passes to Uru's 7. 26 June, 1831 hours, Japan Standard Time. Tamagawa, Chofu. It was evening, Chidori Kaname was strolling through a residential district down the road that led from the station to her home. A sour-looking Sagara Sosuke followed, about 5 steps behind her. "When are you going to give it a rest?" Kaname demanded, stopping suddenly in front of a greengrocer's stand. "I don't need your stalkery bodyguarding anymore, remember? So could you please stop following me?" "Well, it's just that my apartment is in the same direction." Sosuke was still living in the apartment that Mithril had prepared for the purpose of guarding Kaname. It was a 1-minute walk from hers. The news that he wasn't actually following her caused Kaname to frown. Well, obviously." She started walking again. Apparently, even Sosuke had his limits when it came to Kaname's obstinacy, because he walked up behind her and said, "There's something I want to ask you." "What is it?" "What can I do to make you understand? I explained why I broke my promise. I gave you poppy flowers as a sign of repentance. In the interests of ensuring your future safety, I believe it's best we mend our relationship." A shot of irritation went through Kaname. Why did he always have to talk this way? "Mend what relationship? We're classmates, that's all. I don't see why we need to be on speaking terms. Do you?" "It's my duty to protect you," Sosuke insisted. Not again, Kaname thought. This arrogance was so typical. He was so full of himself. She snorted her derision. "Cut the Kevin Costner act. You're just a loser who gets on everyone's nerves, and I never asked for your protection." At times like these, Kaname could turn her venom on full blast. "It's true that I never gained your consent, but—" "But what? I have some weird power and the bad guys want it. That's all it is, right? You don't actually care what happens to me." "That's not true. If anything were to happen to you—" "Stop acting like you care!" Kaname shouted, loud enough to earn looks from passers-by. "Work is all that matters to you, and of course it is. You're a war-obsessed jerk, and you don't care about anything but your missions. If you're not going to change, at least take your self-sabotaging stupidity somewhere I don't have to see it." Her words came so quickly that there was no room for argument. "Let me tell you the extent of our relationship," she went on. "If you die on one of your stupid missions, I'll find it in my heart to light a stick of incense in your memory. And when I get a boyfriend, sometime when we're in bed together, I'll laugh and tell him about the weird idiot I once knew at school. Is that good enough for you?" By the end she was shouting, her shoulders heaving. It was then that she realized Sosuke wasn't angry, but silent and standing perfectly still. "I just don't care about you," she said at last. Then, suddenly unable to take it any longer, she turned her back on him. She dashed away, cut across the street, ran up to the entrance of her apartment complex, dove into the elevator, and let the doors close behind her. As the elevator ascended, then, and only then— "Ugh, what a stupid jerk I am," she admitted as she banged her head against the wall. "I know he was just trying to say 'I'm sorry' in his own way. Why can't I ever just be honest?" 26 June, 1840 hours, Japan Standard Time. Tiger's apartment complex, Tamagawa, Chofu. Sosuke headed for his apartment, racking his brain. He couldn't understand why Kaname was acting this way. She'd told Sosuke she hated him. She said she didn't care if he died. She'd said that she didn't want him around. But how can that be true? He wondered. She'd helped him study, made lunches for him, helped cover for his various blunders at school. Those were expressions of affection, weren't they? Was she still angry about him breaking his promise last night? He'd explained and apologized for that, of course, but she hadn't forgiven him. So she really does hate me, then. Perhaps her daily acts of kindness were just a thank you for his protection. The thought sent a sudden ache spreading from the back of his head down to his shoulders. He'd experienced this sensation a few times before, when he was surrounded by enemies and told that no reinforcements were coming, when he was heading home on a transport helicopter and the pilot shouted, "We're out of fuel!" when his comrade Sergeant Kurtz Weber told him, "Hey, don't worry." It was a deeply unpleasant feeling. I love that last one. I love the last one. It's like, oh, Sergeant Kurtz Weber saying, "Hey, don't worry," is on the same level as "I'm going to die." Sosuke was always out of his depth in interpersonal affairs, but he'd found his relationship with Kaname to be a particularly mysterious and baffling one. "Sounds like love. You're a dead man," Kurtz had told him once with a cheery laugh. Sosuke had regretted talking to him about it. Even he knew, albeit from hearsay, that love was supposed to be a pleasant thing. It was logically impossible that the word could apply to this wasting misery he felt right now. With his mind churning all of this over, he trudged down the fifth-floor communal corridor and came to a stop in front of his door. That's when he realized it. There was someone in his apartment. No, maybe two someones? No matter how wrapped up in his thoughts he might be, his trained soldier's instincts weren't about to miss that. He shoved his worries out of his mind and pulled a 9mm handgun from the small of his back. He remained quiet, evaluating. The door was unlocked. Had they used the spare key he hid in the mailbox? If so, it wouldn't be Kurtz or Mao. They both had copies of his key. Who then? He wondered. It didn't seem right for an ambush. He took in a deep breath, then burst through the door with all his might. Like a snake lunging at his prey, low and sharp, he dashed through the short entry hall. He sprung out into the living room and pointed his gun at the intruders. There were two of them. One was an unfamiliar boy, gaunt and dressed in pajamas. The other was a girl in a dingy suit, with ash blonde hair and blue eyes. She was holding a large automatic pistol that seemed out of place in her dainty hands, which she was pointing at the boy. Sorry. She stood frozen on the spot, wearing her surprise and fear openly. But when she recognized Sosuke, she let out a sigh of heartfelt relief. "Ah, Sagara-san! Oh, thank goodness!" Sosuke's eyes went wide. "Colonel?" The girl, Colonel Talitha Testarossa, lowered her gun and slumped against the wall behind her, as if all of the tension had left her body at once. "I thought you were the enemy, and that I was finished. I'm not very good with firearms." "What's going on here?" Sosuke asked. "Who's that boy?" "You can't let him get away," Tessa insisted anxiously. "He's, well—" Sosuke met the silent boy's eyes. There was something off about his gaze. What is he looking at? The next thing Sosuke knew, the boy stood up, wavering, and took a step forward. Sosuke looked at him cautiously, instinctively pointing his gun at him. The boy let out a groan. Then, with a sudden blood-curdling scream, he lunged at Sosuke. Rather than firing, Sosuke leaned over, executing a shoulder throw on the charging boy. As the boy landed on his back, winded, Sosuke plunged the grip of his gun into his solar plexus. The boy gulped and lost consciousness. Who is he? Sosuke wondered, even as he casually secured his victory. Just in time. The tranquilizer must have worn off, Tessa said. He handcuffed the boy, his name was Takuma, apparently, and threw him into the bedroom, then brought out a folding chair and offered it to Tessa. There was almost no furniture in his apartment, which meant no sofa, of course. Sosuke didn't know why a young girl like Tessa was serving as commander-in-chief of the amphibious assault team Tuach Dedanan, but most of their squad, himself included, recognized that she had the intelligence and ability for the role. It was why Sosuke was always nervous when speaking to her. Fighting alone in an arms slave felt like a simple task, compared with carrying the fates of several hundred people every day. Talitha Testarossa was on a higher plane of existence. He asked her if she wanted some coffee. "Please," she said. Sosuke gave her an awkward salute, then headed for the kitchen. 10 minutes later, Tessa had given him a rough outline of the situation. Sosuke was surprised, but digested the information quickly. At the same time, he found it hard to believe anyone would take an AS to a government facility just to retrieve this one boy. It felt, to him, like performing a chainsaw appendectomy. The enemy must enjoy such gratuitous violence. Tessa went on to explain how she'd lost contact with Major Kalinin, how she and her bodyguard, Corporal Yang, tried to take Takuma out of the facility, and everything that had happened after. "So you borrowed a car from the laboratory and drove off?" Sosuke asked from the kitchen as he watched the coffee maker bubble away. "Yes," she affirmed. "Their possession of an AS made calling in a helicopter the more dangerous proposition, and our transmitters were broken anyway. Yang-san forced himself to drive despite his injury." "And you came right here?" "No. We were on our way when Yang-san's condition suddenly worsened. He seemed on the verge of losing consciousness, so I was forced to drop him off near Higashikurume. There we go. Say that 5 times fast without expecting it. Higa- so I was forced to drop him off near Higashikurume. I used a public telephone to call an ambulance, then caught a taxi to get some distance." "She really is intelligent," Sosuke thought. Mithril had no permanent center of operations in Tokyo. He'd heard that their intelligence division was setting up a Tokyo branch, but it wouldn't be up and running for a while. In other words, this apartment was the one place in the country that contained someone Tessa could trust. Contacting the Japanese police was out. A supposedly secret laboratory had already been attacked. There was nowhere else she could safely go. "I changed taxis twice and finally made my way here," she went on. "Melissa had told me where the key was, so—" Sosuke's comrade, Master Sergeant Melissa Mao, and Tessa were close on a personal level, as fellow East Coast Americans. Why would the subject of my spare key come up? Just what do these two talk about? He wondered. "What's the significance of Takuma himself?" is what he said out loud. "Oh, I'm sorry, but you're not authorized to know that," Tessa said apologetically. "I see. Forgive me for asking." Sosuke saw nothing suspicious about being denied this information. It wasn't unusual to hear such things when you were part of an organization like Mithril. "Just know that he's important to them, important enough to spur such drastic action on their part, and that if we allow them to retrieve him, terrible things will result." Sosuke filled a mug with coffee, returned to the living room, and offered it to Tessa. "Thank you, Sakura-san." "Not at all, though I'm afraid it's an inexpensive brand." "I spent close to 2 hours here watching over Takuma. I'm exhausted," Tessa admitted. "I didn't know the personal code required to activate your transmitter, even—" "Oh, that's just not the way you read that." "I didn't even know the personal code required to activate your transmitter, even." "I'm sorry to hear it. Do you think Corporal Yang will pull through?" Sosuke thought back on the highly competent, if sometimes overly trusting, Corporal. "Yes. His injuries didn't seem critical. It was just the blood loss." Tessa took a dainty sip from her cup, then sighed. "I feel so worthless. I'm no use at all on land. Because of me, Kalinin-san might—" Tessa hesitated, then glanced at Sosuke. "I don't know how to tell you how sorry I am. I know he's like a father to you." "It's not your fault. He was doing his duty," Sosuke told her. "And besides, we don't know that he's dead." "Of course you're right, but—" "It's actually more likely that he's alive."
But
"He and I first met as enemies. I've never faced anyone more formidable." This was Sosuke's attempt at being reassuring, but Tessa's reaction was different than expected. It was like, instead of comfort, she'd found a new source of unease.
enemies?
She asked.
It was a long time ago, during the USSR's re-invasion of Afghanistan,
Sosuke explained.
we had an encounter in the Panjshir Valley.
Sosuke had been raised as a guerrilla in Afghanistan, while Kalinin was a leader of a Spetsnaz force. With the country embroiled in civil war, any meeting between them there would have had to be. Let's try that again. With the country embroiled in civil war, any meeting between them there would have had to be on the battlefield.
I knew the terrain like the back of my hand, but he completely beat me. He's a difficult man to kill.
That's a strange form of reassurance.
But I'm sure you're right. I'll assume Kalainen-san is safe until proven otherwise. Tessa smiled weakly. Then, realizing that Sosuke was still standing at attention, she said, You don't have to be so respectful, Sagara-san. Please sit. This is your apartment, after all. No, ma'am, he countered. This is a Mithril safe house. But you live here, don't you? Yes, ma'am, but it was acquired with Mithril funds. At last Tessa broke out in a big smile. You're exactly how Melissa said you were. What? Sosuke was surprised. Completely inflexible, utterly straight-laced, and terribly kind. The way you comforted me about Kalainen-san, for instance. Ah, well, I... He trailed off, frozen with discomfort. Tessa peeked up at him, a faint light of mischief dancing in her large gray eyes. Were you aware that I'm the same age as you? Uh, I had heard that, yes. If we walked hand in hand, she pointed out, we'd look like boyfriend and girlfriend. Ma'am, I'm honored, Sosuke managed. He wondered if it would have been better to say something like, I'm sure I'd be unworthy of you, but Tessa didn't seem offended by his choice. Instead, she adopted a shy but lovely smile. As am I. Well, all the joking aside, you really should relax more at times like these. It's hard for me to speak to you when you're so tense. Yes, ma'am. That wasn't an order. Understood. Was it a request? Something like that. I'd like it if you'd take it as a request from a friend, Tessa told him. I will, ma'am, Sosuke said, barely relaxing at all. As ordered. Tessa adopted an expression that was a mix of amusement and sorrow. Well, good enough. Now, I have one other favor to ask. Yes, ma'am. Could I use your bathroom? You see, the shape I'm in. She tugged at her dust-covered blouse and held up her fraying braid. Huh? I'd like to take a shower. It's working, isn't it? Yes, ma'am, he said with some hesitation. At your leisure. Shall I contact the Dadanan? Please. It should be in a deep dive at the moment, but so have the Merida Island base send an ELF transmission telling them to rise to periscope depth. My ID code for this week is A Man from Nantucket. Once the ship surfaces and opens a secure channel, I'll speak to them directly. It occurs to me that I should be voicing her like with a Boston or maybe a JFK type accent, but I'm not. It's too late now, and her past history also gives room for it to work this way. You'll see. It would have made sense if I'd remembered that she was from East Coast US. Yeah, I could make her a New Yorker. I could make her from Boston. It could be great. It'd be jarring, but it would also be hilarious. But we're not gonna. I guess that means I could make Melissa Mount. Nah, never mind. We're not gonna do that. Her instructions given. Once the ship surfaces and opens a secure channel, I'll speak to them directly. Her instructions given, Tessa headed for the bathroom. It was times like these that Sosuke wished his hearing wasn't so good. He could hear the sound of clothing rustling in the changing room, the swish-swish of it being dropped into the washer. Then a much softer rustling, her legs sliding smoothly out of something, the clack of the bathroom door opening, then closing. Sosuke remained silent and still through it all. He wasn't especially trying to listen in, and he wasn't really trying to imagine her naked, but still he felt restless. Talitha Testarossa, the woman who existed on a plane beyond his comprehension, was in his shower. She wasn't wearing a stitch of her informal civilian outfit. It was like a huge bomb had been placed, safety off, just beyond the bathroom door. Okay, get back to work, Sosuke thought sternly. He shook his head and committed himself to carrying out her instructions, using the apartment's satellite transmitter to contact the Tuach Dedanan in the Pacific. Radio waves didn't travel well underwater, so he couldn't talk to them directly. He instead asked Mithril's West Pacific base to send a short message via ELF transmission. He received a reply 2 minutes later. Roger that. Please contact again at 10:20 GMT on line G3. That was about 20 minutes from now. Sosuke turned off the receiver. Once contact was achieved, either the Dedanan or the West Pacific base would send reinforcements. Then they could take Takuma overseas, where he'd be out of enemy hands, and they'd have won, assuming he and Tessa could just keep him safe until then. Sosuke checked the bedroom where he'd left Takuma handcuffed to the simple bed. The boy was where he'd left him, and awake again already. He regarded Sosuke with a surprising degree of calm. "Are you hungry?" Sosuke asked, probing his reaction. "No," Takuma responded, sounding more lucid than expected. "You understand me?" "Of course I do, Sagara Sosuke-san." Takuma smiled slightly after saying his full name. He'd probably just seen the door plate on their way into the apartment, but it was clearly meant as a provocation, as if to say, "I know exactly who you are." "You seem intelligent," Sosuke said, then returned to the living room. He turned on the TV and began his weapons maintenance routine. The 7 o'clock news happened to be playing on NHK, but nothing was mentioned about the laboratory attack. The Japanese government must be trying to keep everything quiet, including the presence of an AS-armed terrorist group at large. "We might want to move sooner rather than later," Sosuke thought while inspecting his silencer-attached submachine gun. The enemy probably didn't know about his apartment, but that was no reason to let his guard down. He was using a speed loader to fill a spare magazine with 9mm rounds when he heard the doorbell ring. Sosuke said nothing, but took his just-checked submachine gun and bulletproof vest and headed for the entrance. He held the vest like a shield, just in case they shot at him through the door. Eventually, he looked out the peephole. Kaname's face filled the distorted view provided by the fisheye lens. She had changed into her street clothes, and was fidgeting somewhat nervously in front of his door. He opened it suspiciously. "Chidori, what's the matter?" And if you give me 1 sec here, I have a book cover change to do at this juncture. That's the one. "Wow," was the first thing she said. "What's with the scary gun?" "Things happened," he said evasively. "Did you run into anyone suspicious outside?" "Oh, please, of course not. Look, Kaname hesitated, then looked down, then tapped the floor with her toe, and mumbled vaguely. I think I was too hard on you before. I mean, it's not like you were just off messing around, and I'm trying to be understanding about this stuff. I guess I'm just stubborn in a lot of ways. So, I'm trying to say." She gulped audibly and finished. "Well, I'm sorry." She bowed to him, then looked at him with upturned eyes. It was the face of someone afraid of total rejection. "Good. The incident is finally resolved," Sosuke thought. The oppressive feeling from earlier was gone without a trace. Perhaps he'd been overly sensitive in assuming that she hated him. "I feel like I'm the one constantly making trouble for you," he admitted. "It feels strange to have you apologize to me." "You forgive me?" she asked. "There's no need. I'm the one at fault." "Really? Thanks so much!" Kaname's expression instantly brightened, and she produced a multi-tiered lunchbox from behind her back. "So, anyway, I've got some stuff left over from yesterday. I brought it by. You want it? If you let me use your kitchen, I can heat it up, too." "Well," Sosuke racked his brain. Tessa and Takuma were in the apartment, and Tessa was currently... He hadn't technically done anything wrong, yet his stomach churned with feelings of guilt. "Did you eat already?" she asked. "No, not yet." The anxiety that clouded her eyes made him hesitant to lie. "Then come on, let's eat together. Can't I come in?" Kaname tried to step inside, but Sosuke blocked her way. "What's wrong?"
"Well, your kindness is appreciated, but
"But what?"
I'm currently in the middle of a complicated, sensitive situation,"
Sosuke told her apologetically.
"It would require time to explain, and I lack full confidence that you would understand."
"What are you talking about?" Kaname asked suspiciously. Just then the door to the bathroom, which was just by the front door, opened. Tessa, naked except for a bath towel, peeked out, her wet hair shedding silver droplets onto the floor below.
Sagata-san, do you have a t-shirt or... Oh?
Tessa and Kaname's eyes met. For about 3 seconds, both stood there, dumbstruck. Standing between them, Sosuke felt greasy sweat form on his brow and shook his head rapidly. He knew, on an instinctual level, that something very bad was happening. Yes, whatever this was, It was extremely not good.
Good evening,
Tessa said with a bashful smile and a slight flush in her cheeks. For some reason, she was acting like a leading lady from a Hollywood movie, right after a love scene.
Um, good evening.
Kaname replied dumbly. Then, expression blank, she forced the wrapped parcel into Sosuke's hands.
Here, you two take it.
Chidori? He stuttered.
Sorry to interrupt you and your girlfriend. She's really pretty.
Kaname then spun around and sped down the hall. Really realizing vaguely that things were hurtling in a very serious direction, Sosuke tried to follow Kaname, but
Could you please not follow me?
she snapped at him, rooting him in place before he got far. Chidori, you have it all wrong, he told her.
How exactly?
She's my superior, a colonel from Mithril and the captain of our amphibious assault submarine. She's out of my league in every possible way. If Sosuke had been a little less flustered, he probably would have realized how absurd this claim sounded.
Do you think I'm stupid?
Kaname demanded. Of course not. Kaname had stopped. Her shoulders were trembling. Sosuke couldn't see her face, but he felt sure that she was angry. He was wrong.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I shouldn't have butted in. I guess I've been a huge pain in the neck this whole time, huh?
No, Chidori, that's not the case at all.
Look, it's fine. You don't have to soften it. I'm not angry. I'm just sorry. I'll be more careful from now on, so.
Chidori,
I'm just sorry, okay?
Kaname said, and then ran for the emergency stairwell.
The colonel is not to blame. The fault lies with the terrorists,
Sosuke told himself. At this point, if he ended up in a firefight with A-21, he might be forced to keep shooting until he'd discharged every round in his possession. When he returned, he found Tessa using the satellite transmitter to contact the Tuach Dadanan in the Pacific. She was talking to her XO, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Mardukas. Since she had no change of clothes on hand, she was currently dressed, rather alluringly, in nothing but a khaki-colored T-shirt. It was his first time seeing her slender legs, her small, adorable toes. The T-shirt's too big collar gave him occasional glimpses of her white chest area, which made it hard for him to know where to rest his eyes. Even a walking block of wood like Sosuke could recognize the appeal of a girl like Tessa. Her defenselessness just added to it. Tessa was confusing him in a completely different way than Kaname did. Apparently, having finished her discussion, she turned off the transmitter.
How did it go?
He asked.
They're sending reinforcements. Melissa and Weber-san,
She said, referring to Mao and Kurtz.
They'll bring an M9 with them. We'll convey Takuma to the Dadanan and then issue your next assignment.
May I ask what that is, ma'am?
Recon, to find the enemy hideout. I asked the Dadanan's Mother AI to track transmissions by the police and the JSDF, so we should have a few hints by morning. Once we've located them, we can decide whether to leave them for further tracking or subjugate.
Tessa said in her commander's voice.
And you, ma'am?
Sosuke wanted to know.
I'll remain in Tokyo. There's a very high chance that the enemies possess special equipment that only I know how to deal with.
Sosuke chose not to pursue the matter. He knew that even if he asked what the special equipment was, she likely wouldn't tell him.
So for now, we just wait. Let's see.
Tessa sat down in the folding chair and stretched a bit.
Was that girl from before Chidori Kaname?
Huh? Her question was so out of the blue that he was at a loss to respond.
She was Chidori Kaname, wasn't she?
Yes.
You seem close, she observed.
No, ma'am, he said after a pause. We're not particularly.
Really? It didn't look that way to me. Making you dinner and bringing it by. She seemed almost like your wife.
I apologize, ma'am, Sosuke said humbly. I'll be more careful about mixing business and personal life from now on.
Tessa smiled at Sosuke's response. That's not how I meant it. I'm the one who approved your guardianship of her, and you were never told not to get close.
It was actually Major Kalainen who had given him the order, but of course, as his superior, Tessa would know about it too.
I was curious, that's all. I thought maybe even Sakata-san has a girl that he likes.
There was a strange tone in her voice, as if she were sounding him out somehow. Sosuke just froze up, unsure of how to answer, so she pressed him a bit more, meekly, for some reason.
Are you dating him, then?
Are you dating her, then?
No, certainly not, Sosuke answered.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. The fact of the matter is, I'm having a hard time building up a true relationship of trust.
I see. I'm glad. Tessa linked her hands and smiled. Feeling as if his superior had accepted his report, Sosuke relaxed. He was about to salute her, but
No, wait. What does she mean? I'm glad. Why would she be happy to hear that things aren't going well between us?
Tessa kept smiling. There was no particular air of malice about her.
I don't understand,
Sosuke thought, and he genuinely didn't. Perhaps it was beyond the understanding of a mere NCO like himself. He repeated to himself that she was still the commander-in-chief of the Tuatha De Danann, and then tried to change the subject.
If I may, ma'am, we should discuss Takuma. His personal significance aside, what do the forces of A21 consist of?
Tessa seemed caught off guard by his question, but quickly recovered.
Well, I'm not completely sure yet. They have very advanced weaponry, and I imagine they're well trained. How do they gather intelligence?
Unknown. There's a chance they have a mole in the Japanese government.
Should we question Takuma?
I thought about that, but he hasn't been very cooperative, and I don't wish to resort to violence. I'd like to watch things a bit longer before I decide.
But
Sosuke stopped. His expression was suddenly sharp and dangerous.
it seems we can't stay here regardless.
He picked up his submachine gun and shoved 2 spare magazines into his belt. Tessa furrowed her brow. What's the matter?
Get into the kitchen and get down.
Get down. Those 2 words must have told Tessa everything she needed to know. She didn't bother asking if she could help in any way. She would know that anything she did would just trip him up.
Be careful,
She said. Then, before she said, be careful was all she said, then, before moving into the kitchen. The doorbell rang. He knew it wasn't Kaname. He tapped the intercom button on the living room wall. "Package delivery," came the response.
I'm on my way,
He answered, but he didn't head for the front door. He remained exactly where he was, a finger on the light switch. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. A quiet tension hung over the room. A murderous intent crackled in the air like electricity.
I'm back in my element,
Sosuke thought. That status quo lasted all of 10 seconds before the veranda window broke and a grenade flew in. No, not a grenade, a tear gas canister, which immediately spewed its noxious fumes. Its arrival was followed by a man in a black battle uniform, wearing a gas mask and wielding a submachine gun. This was what Sosuke was waiting for. He shut the lights off in the living room and opened fire at the man in black. The sudden darkness slowed the intruder's reactions enough that Sosuke's wall of fire hit him unguarded. He fell, and fell silent.
More are coming, Sosuke thought. The room next door.
Ignoring the tear gas filling the room, Sosuke moved efficiently to the bedroom. He told Takuma to get down, then emptied his clip at the window behind the boy. Glass broke and sparks flew around the frame. He heard a short scream, followed by the sound of someone falling outside on the veranda. As he replaced his weapon's magazine in a smooth motion, he next heard a soft blast from the front door. Someone had blown off the hinges and knob with plastic explosives. This new intruder kicked down the door and entered the front way. Sosuke returned to the living room. Through the darkness and thick fog of the tear gas, he could see a figure in a deliveryman's uniform, wearing a gas mask and holding a large automatic pistol.
Drop your weapon,
Sosuke said, offering the mercy of a warning that the man didn't take. He pointed his gun at Sosuke, so Sosuke didn't hesitate to shoot him. The muzzle flash created swirls in the tear gas. 5 9mm slugs took the deliveryman down. Sosuke checked the communal hall, the veranda, and elsewhere, but he saw no sign of more enemies.
3 of them, he muttered. It seems a bit.
inadequate, he thought. While it was smart of them to surround him, their timing was slightly off, and reasonably skilled though they were, they'd had the misfortune of facing Sosuke. He could hear Tessa, coughing violently, turn on the kitchen's exhaust fan. It must be awful if you haven't built up a tolerance, he thought, before assuring her, we're safe now, ma'am. Right, she said through more coughing. Realizing she wouldn't be able to talk for a while, he approached the fallen intruder in the living room. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, but shots to the throat and head had killed him instantly. Sosuke stood there in silence. He felt a pang of something like pity, but it passed. How many security and lab personnel had this man killed in the exact same way? It wasn't unjust for him to meet a similar end. Cliché though it was to say, this was kill or be killed. The intruder must have rappelled down from the roof to the veranda. His unused submachine gun was loaded with specialized bullets for wars against terrorism. Both were far beyond what you could get from local crime syndicates. Sosuke removed the man's gas mask and looked into his face. He sobered silently. The man was young and Japanese, not much older than Sosuke. His eyes, wide open in shock, stared emptily past him. Sosuke checked the other two bodies on the veranda and at the entrance. They were the same way. Likely Japanese and not much older than 20, if that. He'd thought the same thing when looking at the pictures in yesterday's operation. Just what kind of terrorist organization was A21, that it was comprised entirely of boys like these? They didn't seem like a political organization, but... Once she was recovered, Tessa came out of the kitchen. She made it to the bedroom and looked down, pale-faced, at the man lying on the veranda. She didn't give voice to her feelings, but simply asked, "How did they know we were here?" "I doubt they followed you here," Sosuke said. "They would have had countless chances to attack you and Takuma before you arrived." "True. It's hard to believe they could have had an informant in Mithril. Perhaps I underestimated their intelligence network. The only option, the only other option is..." She suddenly stopped. Her voice cracked. "Is... Colonel, I'm sorry. As if unable to bear it any longer, Tessa threw herself at Sosuke. Her slender fingers clutched at his button-up shirt. Her shoulders trembled, and her breathing was ragged. I know it's strange to act this way, because of something like this, after all this time, but I'd been letting my guard down, and... She squeezed out the words, her head pressed against Sosuke's chest. Sosuke didn't know that he was the reason she had let her guard down. She'd let herself fall into the mindset of a normal girl, talking to a boy her own age, so this sudden reminder of the world she really lived in had brought forth a surge of emotions. "I'm sorry. I'll be back to normal soon. I'm sorry," she repeated again and again, fighting her tears as hard as she could. Sosuke just stood where he was, uncertain of how to respond. Just then he heard a chuckle from the nearby Takuma. "Is something funny?" he asked. "No, but it's interesting that you think you have time to spend on crying," Takuma replied. "What do you mean?" Sosuke asked, carefully prying Tessa off of him. "You're going to share their fate soon enough. There's nowhere you can run. As long as I'm with you, my comrades will find you." "You must be quite important." "I am. Very," Takuma asserted with confidence. "You'd be better off letting me go now. Just a friendly warning." "There's another way to resolve things." Sosuke pointed his submachine gun at Takuma's head, suggesting a much simpler way of keeping him out of the enemy's reach. "You're gonna kill me?" "I believe you know that I'd do it if necessary," Sosuke returned.
"No, Sagara-san."
Tessa warned him from behind. Her crying had ceased by now. "Ma'am, may I ask why not?"
"Well, I agree that it's the safest and most logical course of action, but that's simply not how we do things," Tessa said, as if she was the one who needed reminding. "Don't you understand? If we do that, we'll be just like they are. The entire point of having an organization like ours, doing what we do, will be lost."
I mean, they've killed a lot of people up till now, so it's a slippery slope. Sosuke remained in position. He looked at his gun, then at the expression on Takuma's face beyond it. The boy had seemed arrogant before, but there was emotion on his face now. Most people would miss it. The tiniest sign of fear.
Sagara-san, do you think I'm naive?
Tessa asked. Of course not. Sosuke lowered the gun. Be grateful to her, he said, then turned around and left. Takuma watched him go, then looked at Tessa.
Do you expect me to act like I'm in your debt? No, and that isn't why I stopped him, anyway. So much virtuous posturing, Takuma sneered. It's how you make yourself feel special, I'm sure. Think that way if you wish,
Tessa said indifferently, then followed Sosuke to the living room.
Thank you, Sagara-san.
Not at all, Sosuke replied, but it's going to be trouble if more of them come.
You're right, she agreed. We can't stay here.
I'll dispose of the bodies. Can you contact the Dadanan? For our destination, tell them... Sosuke thought about where to go next. Tell them we're going to study Japanese history.
Japanese history?
Tessa questioned. Sergeant Weber will understand. June 2031 hours, Japan Standard Time. Maison K, Tamagawa, Chofu. Kaname lay on the sofa, staring emptily at the ceiling. She'd wanted to cry at first, but that had passed, and now she just felt tired all over. What she'd seen had been a real shock to her system. She'd assumed he was so standoffish and inflexible that no girl would ever make time for him.
But he had a girlfriend like her this whole time. I've been so stupid, she thought. Just because we've been through a little life or death situation doesn't mean he really cares about me. I got myself all puffed up thinking I was the only one who saw any good in him. What was I thinking? Everyone must be laughing at how stupid I am.
She picked up a hand mirror next to her and looked at her own face.
I'm so ugly.
At least that's what the girl must have thought. That's what that girl must have thought. Compared to her, sparkling silver hair and big gray eyes, a dazzling smile like a figure skater or a gymnast.
She was so pretty.
Kaname couldn't compete. And given the way she was acting, they were clearly in the afterglow of something.
Is she the real reason Sosuke broke his promise yesterday? She wondered. Maybe he lied about it being for work. They were actually doing things all night long. And then Sosuke went to school in the morning while she stayed in his apartment all day.
The idea contradicted a lot of facts as she knew them, but in that moment she lacked the objectivity to realize it.
I wonder how they met each other, she whispered to herself. The daughter of a dead comrade? Someone he saved once, the way he saved me? It must have been a dramatic encounter either way, like something out of those new 007 movies. I bet they've been together since long before he met me.
The idea was entirely without basis, but in that moment she lacked the calm to reflect upon that.
I wonder what they're doing now. Sharing a meal together, maybe? The two of them talking happily across the table, gazing at each other with puppy dog eyes, whispering, I love you.
In fact, Sosuke was stoically disposing of terrorist corpses, but Kaname had no way of knowing that. She turned on the TV, turned it off, stared into space for about 10 minutes, and then the doorbell rang.
Who's coming by at this hour? Darn it.
Kaname rolled over sluggishly on the sofa, considered pretending she wasn't home, then at last got up and went to the door. She didn't check who it was first. So she was surprised when it was Sosuke, looking grim. He was with that girl, who was looking even more grim. They were accompanied by an unfamiliar boy who was, indeed, looking grim. Um, she asked, completely baffled by their presence. We need help. Please hide us. Sosuke said morosely. Fuming all the while that this is a pretty big ask, and it's none of my business, you know. She nevertheless made them a pot of roasted green tea. It was hard to say if it was the result of good upbringing or if she was just a pushover, but either way it was one of her better traits. Even after they explained the rough outline of events, though, her dissatisfaction still wouldn't abate. Okay, so Kaname placed the teacups onto the table. There's some weird terrorist group out there, and it's after you because of this jerky-looking guy? She was referring to Takuma. Sosuke had wanted to toss him in the bathroom, but Kaname didn't like the idea, so they'd been forced to sit him down within arm's reach. He was being docile for now, at least. And you're saying this girl is your superior officer? Kaname continued. And a colonel? Correct, Sosuke replied succinctly. Boy, I knew you were a lousy liar, but this is pushing it, you know? Kaname's skepticism was likely exacerbated by Takuma's presence, which prevented him from sharing any details of Mithril's situation or internal structure. So, Testarossa-san, right? How old are you? 16, but I'll be 17 in 6 months, Tessa answered, then took a sip of her tea. She was now wearing baggy cargo pants beneath her t-shirt, jury-rigged in place with a belt. A 16-year-old girl captaining a submarine? Kaname questioned skeptically. I've seen The Hunt for Red October, you know. Submarine captains are hard-edged old guys like Sean Connery. She looks more like Underling A, the character who reads out communications. In spite of Kaname's rudeness, Tessa nodded as if in agreement. But it's the truth, Sosuke protested. Look, I don't care what happened between you guys, Kaname continued, but there's such a thing as basic consideration, you know? If you're going to ask me for help, you can't also be lying to me. Sosuke was already regretting his choice to come here. The streets nearby were poorly lit, and he'd assumed the next apartment complex over would be the last place the enemy would think to look for them. But it was foolish of him to think that Kaname would accept this situation just because he'd explained it. The whole time, Tessa just kept sipping her tea, offering no defense whatsoever. She apparently had no intention of backing Sosuke up. Was it just his imagination, or had she been strangely quiet since he told her they were going to Kaname's place? Colonel, Colonel, he addressed her, but she didn't respond. Then she looked up a few seconds later, as if only just realizing she was being addressed. Oh, that's me. Right. What is it? Her reaction just deepened Kaname's suspicions. Colonel, will you please explain? Sosuke asked, panicking. Explain what? Tessa asked innocently. Your identity, Sosuke clarified. Your circumstances. Oh, right. Well, I'm a battleship. No, was it a submarine captain? I'm a submarine captain and a colonel, and I'm Sosuke's commanding officer. Really, you have to believe me, Chidori Kaname-san. Sosuke could feel the sweat rising on his back. Why was she explaining things so haltingly? And she'd called him Sosuke, too. It didn't feel like an expression of closeness. There was malice behind it. Had he offended her somehow? Colonel. Is something the matter, Sergeant Sagara? This time she gave him a beaming smile, a smile pregnant with meaning. Not at all, he said at last. Anyway, Chidori, it's all true, so... I see. I get it. I totally get it, Kaname said. She didn't sound like she got it at all. I'm a very patient person, so if you insist that's the story, then I'll leave it at that. Now, let's move on to the next question. Kaname glared at Takuma. Mr. Smirky over here. What's his deal? He really gets on my nerves, and I can't explain why. I'm so very sorry, Chidori Kaname-san, Takuma responded quietly. Kaname snorted. You don't look sorry to me, and you haven't even tried the tea I made you. I'm not thirsty. Kaname struck the table, and Tessa recoiled. Takuma showed a hint, just a hint, of surprise. Kaname leaned across the table to glare down into his face.
It's a politeness thing.
Her voice was strangely intimidating.
Now drink. This ain't the cheap stuff.
And if I refuse?
I've got some flat Dr. Pepper in the fridge, Kaname replied. I'll pour it down your throat until you beg for mercy.
Takuma said nothing.
I mean it, okay?
Takuma raised the teacup and took the tiniest of sips.
Satisfied?
You're a real piece of work. I'd love to meet your parents. I bet they spoiled you rotten,
Kaname grumbled. In a second, Takuma's expression became dangerous. Sosuke tensed, expecting another outburst, but it seemed things hadn't reached that point just yet. Still, the boy glared at Kaname with dark, inhuman eyes. Kaname, though, was far from cowed. She looked like a general who'd just spotted a weakness in the enemy ranks.
Ooh, did that make you mad? Don't fight fun of my mommy, etc.
I don't have a mother,
Takuma told her flatly. His words gave Kaname a moment of pause.
What a coincidence. Neither do I. Neither does Sosuke. Did you think you were the only person in the world like that?
Takuma went silent again.
Guess I hit the nail on the head. So typical.
Kaname gloated.
Look at that spoiled little expression of yours. I shudder to think what your family was like.
His voice rising to a cry, Takuma. Oh, whoops, skipped a line. Takuma started to moan, and his eyes lost their focus. Here it comes, Sosuke thought. He didn't know the boy's exact condition, but he'd assumed that certain emotional triggers were what drew out his aggression. His voice rising to a cry, Takuma lost his cool and tried to jump at Kaname. Sosuke grabbed him and held him back.
Ah! You!
Kicking and struggling, Takuma trailed off into more incoherent screams as he was pulled away from the table. Kaname was stunned for a moment by Takuma's rage, but her dropped jaw quickly turned into a grin and a flash of a V sign.
Made you bad. I win.
Sosuke, pinning the raging Takuma to the floor, felt renewed regret about his decision to come here. But as he grabbed Takuma's left arm to hold it down, he stopped and stared. There was a lump in the man's upper arm. No, if it was just a lump, it wouldn't have given him pause. It was hard and cylindrical. Someone less acquainted with human anatomy than Sosuke might have assumed it was part of the bone. Something was buried in Takuma's arm. Sosuke knocked him unconscious with a chop to the back of the head. He could hardly examine him while he was struggling like this. "Colonel," he said. Tessa reacted immediately this time, standing up.
What is it?
"Look at this," he said, indicating the lump. She pressed a fingertip against it. Her expression quickly turned serious.
I see. I've been careless.
"Do you know what it is?"
Yes, it's a transmitter. It puts out a signal every few minutes to reveal his position, Tessa clarified. The model was created to monitor prisoners doing labor outdoors, and is primarily made of acrylic and silicon. Most screenings wouldn't detect it.
While Tessa explained, Sosuke had already picked up his submachine gun to prepare for combat. The enemy knew where they were already. An attack could come at any time. No one would have detected a transmitter implanted inside of him. There was no informant after all. They'd tracked him with a much simpler method. "What's going on?" Kaname asked suspiciously. "Nothing good," Sosuke said shortly. "Keep away from the windows and the front door." He focused his attention outside the apartment. He didn't sense an enemy presence. Maybe they were being cautious after the first attack had ended so badly. Perhaps they were waiting for reinforcements. Yes, Chidori.
So it sounds like there's something in his arm?
Kaname hazarded a guess. Yes, it's telling the enemy our position. Sosuke answered in mild annoyance. He searched through his pocket. "Colonel, can you get it out? I have a knife on hand. Morphine, too."
Right, Tessa agreed. I suppose we'll have to, but I know nothing about surgery.
"I'll do it then." Disinfection, surgery, extraction, stitching. He doubted the enemy would give them time for all of it, but they had to disable the transmitter before they took him anywhere else.
Hey,
As Sosuke produced a disposable syringe, Kaname tapped him on the shoulder.
what is it? He asked. I'm busy. You just need to destroy the transmitter, right?
Yes, please give him room.
Yes, please give him room,
Tessa responded in Sosuke's place.
I was just thinking, we've got a big microwave. Want to try that?
Sosuke and Tessa looked at each other. He stuck a chopstick in the small hole behind the microwave door's hinge. By tricking the simple safety switch, he could run the device even with the door open. The arm of the still unconscious Takuma was wrapped in rubber as an insulator, with a hole that left only the transmitter exposed. Once preparations were complete, Sosuke bent the boy's arm and shoved it into the microwave oven.
A few seconds should do it,
he said. Okay, so I'm not totally confident this would work, actually. Because I think that well, if it only has a little metal. Anyway, I don't think the rubber would help very much, would it? At any rate,
A few seconds should do it,
he said.
Okay, here we go.
Kaname spun the timer dial and turned it on. Microwaves, fatal to electronic devices even with the briefest exposure, rained down on the transmitter in his arm. 5 seconds later,
I'm turning it off.
the microwave let out a ding as Kaname turned the dial to 0. Nothing looked different, but he assumed the transmitter would now be disabled.
What an absolutely reckless idea.
Tessa's repugnance was understandable. One miscalculation, and they could have boiled the blood in Takuma's arm. I'm pretty sure he would have been fine. Oh, it would have hurt. It wouldn't have been good. You only need to see video footage of and hear the stories of people being hit by one of those. Oh, what are those called? Those. I think they even use them for some like riot vehicles. Those vehicle-mounted microwave broadcasters that basically make it feel like every single nerve ending in your body is on fire. Because they basically are. It's horrible. It sounds very bad. Subsonic control methods are also bad, but not as immediately fatal. They take a bit longer exposure. See, whatever that thing that was going on in Cuba. Um, I think those were subsonics. They've concluded. I think that was Cuba. Yeah, if it's got any electronics in it, it does. For some reason, I was hung up on it being made out of acrylic and silicon, and I'm like, oh well. But yeah, anything if it has any metal in it at all. But still, it would be very unpleasant. But it is a good idea in a pinch. It's nice and MacGyvery. Let's take it from here. You do not want to, suffice it to say, pro tip, don't be exposed to microwaves. It's bad. It's not healthy. Uh, Focused microwaves. Or high-powered microwaves. That's more important.
What an absurdly reckless idea.
Tessa's repugnance was understandable. One miscalculation, and they could have boiled the blood in Takuma's arm.
But we're safe now, right?
Kaname asked.
Yes, but
Tessa didn't seem to know what to say. The attitude of subtle superiority, or disdain, to put it in less flattering terms, that she had initially shown toward Kaname seemed to be on the wane. It must be hard to maintain one's pride after being shown up in knowledge of basic cooking appliances.
we're not out of the woods yet, Sosuke said as he drew back to the kitchen door. The moment they realize the transmitter's disabled, they'll be after us. We have to leave ASAP.
But since they've known that we're here, Tessa said, they'll be watching the front door, won't they? If they wanted to avoid a fight, they'd have to slip out without being seen.
Chidori,
Sosuke asked. Does your veranda have a fire exit?
You mean a hole in the floor? Yeah.
We'll escape that way, he decided. Sosuke heaved Takuma onto his shoulders and headed to the veranda, with Tessa close behind. He peeked carefully through the curtains to check conditions on that side. There was no sign of surveillance from the building across from them, so it seemed safe to assume that the enemy wasn't watching. Keeping low, he stepped out onto the veranda and located the sliding panel in the floor. Opening it would give him access to the next floor down.
So you're off, huh? Take care, I guess.
Kaname said. She apparently intended to remain. What are you talking about? Sosuke demanded. You're coming with us.
Huh?
Kaname asked in confusion. You'll be a target if you stay. Indeed, they might torture her to find out where Sosuke had gone.
Wait a minute. I'm a bystander here.
I know, but I'm sorry, he apologized. You're involved now.
You've got to be kidding me. I'm not coming along on your little elopement. Don't you realize how messed up that is?
Kaname argued, loud enough that the whole neighborhood could probably hear her. Chidori, as I explained before, we are not.
Yeah, insert labored excuse here. I'll be fine on my own, so just focus on your girlfriend, okay?
Kaname seemed absolutely intractable. Sosuke began to panic. How could he convince her?
Chidori-san, this is all a misunderstanding.
Tessa interrupted, losing her patience.
Sagara-san is telling the truth. I'm sorry that we've dragged you into this, but you really do need to come with us. Your safety is important to Mithril.
She now spoke with precision, so unlike her laid-back demeanor before. Anyone, even Kaname, would be able to see that she wasn't just messing around.
But earlier you... It was a joke that went too far, Tessa admitted candidly. I apologize. As unbelievable as it may seem, I am his superior officer, and I do have several hundred people under my command.
Kaname said nothing.
Mithril is a unique organization. Mithril is a unique organization. Please trust me.
Kaname glanced between Sosuke and Tessa, then stared hard at Takuma. Maybe she was realizing that the situation, that the grouping, didn't fit whatever scenario she'd cooked up in her mind, that things couldn't be as simple as she'd made them out to be. Reluctantly, she nodded.
Something about this still doesn't add up, but fine. I'll come along if I have to. Thank you, Tessa replied. Sagara-san, let's proceed.
Yes, ma'am. Sosuke sighed inwardly in relief. He opted not to tell her that the enemy might still break into her room and rummage through it.
Wait a minute, I still need to pack a travel bag.
No time, he told her shortly.
Can I at least take my PHS? I gotta ask Kyoko to record a drama for me later.
Kaname ran back to her bedroom and returned right away with her portable phone. They opened the panel in the floor, and Sosuke climbed down first. Kaname and Tessa slid Takuma through the hole. Sosuke caught him, and then the girls followed after. Tessa seemed to have trouble with the descent, but she managed it with Sosuke and Kaname's help. The resident of the apartment below didn't seem to notice them. Whoever it was, they were watching baseball with the volume turned all the way up. Bottom of the eighth, 2 outs, bases loaded. It's 4-1 and...
Wow, Hanshin's winning,
Kaname whispered as she lent an ear to the broadcast. Let's go down one more floor, Sosuke whispered back. They climbed to the... Wow, I am having trouble with consonants. My head is really stuffy for whatever reason, so it's making everything hard. Let's go down one more floor, Sosuke whispered back. They climbed to the next veranda, down in the same... Okay, let's try that again. They climbed to the next veranda down in the same manner as before. The lights in that room were out. Nobody seemed to be home. Gratefully, Sosuke broke a window and entered the living room, carrying Takuma... Okay, I flipped the wrong R. Carrying Takuma. Through the darkness, he made it to the front door, unlocked it, cracked it open just 5 centimeters, and checked outside. Anyway, now that we've got that out of our system. Gratefully, Sosuke broke a window and entered the living room. Carrying Takuma through the darkness, he made it to the front door, unlocked it, cracked it open just 5 centimeters, and checked outside. A black van was parked on the street in front of them. Tinted glass windows obscured his view of the back, but there was a man visible in the driver's seat. Sosuke couldn't be sure it was the enemy, but whoever it was, they didn't seem to have noticed them. Let's go, he decided. Sosuke committed the van's plates to memory, then crouched his way down the communal corridor with Kaname and Tessa in tow. He led them down the emergency staircase, vaulted the railing from the first-floor corridor, then hid behind the shrubbery there. Tessa let out a little shriek as she caught her foot on her way over the railing and ended up hitting the ground back first. As Sosuke and Kaname helped her up, she said, I'm fine, in a pained voice. Her eyes were filled with tears, but the injuries didn't seem severe. So where to now? Kaname whispered as she peeked out from behind the hydrangea bushes. I'm thinking, Sosuke answered. We need to go somewhere we won't draw undue attention. Yeah, right, Kaname said, casting a glance at Tessa, who for some reason looked despondent. There was a Mithril vehicle in the parking lot nearby, but Sosuke wanted to remain on foot if possible. The police would likely be on high alert after the incident that morning, and Takuma's face would be everywhere by now. Ideally, it would be somewhere close by, whose layout we're familiar with, but with no danger of getting other people hurt, Sosuke said, laying out the most important tactical conditions. Kaname seemed to find immediate inspiration, and raised an index finger skyward. Hey, I know just the place. Where? School. Not school, Sosuke disagreed. They'll find us there. They would probably search his and Kaname's apartments and immediately learn their connection to Jindai High. Not that one, Kaname explained. There's a high school even closer than here. Even closer to here. June 2107 hours, Japan Standard Time. Akami Pier, Koto Ward, Tokyo. After Andrei Kalainen regained consciousness, he ran a full self-inspection of his body. His nervous system seemed to be working fine. At the very least, he could feel the pain he was in. No issues with his skeletal system beyond a few fractured ribs. This might have caused lung damage, but not enough to be fatal. 6 deep gashes on his arms and back. Those had been caused by glass shards, which had since been removed. The bleeding had staunched, but not without significant blood loss. Conclusion: he was depleted, but stable. His next realization was that he was on a ship moored in the harbor. He could hear the lapping of waves and footsteps echoing faintly through the steel frame. There were no problems with his hearing, then. After judging there was no one around, Kalainen opened his eyes and moved his head slightly. Pain shot down his right side, but he ignored it. He was in a small, amber-colored cabin. He could see a bare-bones bed, naked fluorescent bulbs overhead, rust on the iron walls. There was a metal door across from him, too, and his gut told him that it was locked from the outside. His right leg was handcuffed to the bed frame. He tilted his head to look down at himself, and saw that his wounds had received basic treatment. He was wearing pants, but his top half was bare. His lean, muscular frame was bandaged excessively. Sloppy, Kalainen thought. Whoever brought him here must not have a dedicated doctor in their ranks. After about 5 minutes he heard a sound outside the metal door. It was unlocked and opened, and a woman stepped into the cabin. It was the woman he had seen before he lost consciousness in the lab. He recalled that she'd been addressed as Sena then.
I see you're awake. I see you're awake.
Her voice was cold and delicate, reminiscent of fresh snow. I okay. That's a flowery turn of phrase that I don't even know how to come up with a voice that sounds like fresh snow. Sorry. I don't. I just don't. I'm not that good. I'm good. I'm really good. In fact, I'm not to toot my horn too hard, but I know I'm good. I'm not that good. I cannot make my voice sound like fresh snow. I just don't know how. How do you make your voice sound like fresh snow? Explain this to me. I know it's a flowery turn of phrase, but good golly, how? Sorry. Occasionally, I'm thrown.
Anyhow, I see you're awake.
Her voice was cold and delicate, reminiscent of fresh snow. She was still in her orange operator's uniform. She had delicate features and chestnut hair, worn in a mushroom cut. "Can I help you?" Kalinin asked, without attempting to sit up.
I wanted to talk to you,
she said. "If I were you, I wouldn't waste my time," Kalinin offered. "I'd simply kill me and dump me in the ocean."
Always time for that later.
Sena gave a cold smile and leaned against the door.
You have an excellent subordinate. He took out 3 of our pursuers and absconded with your secretary girl in Takuma.
By secretary girl, she probably meant Talitha Testarossa, which meant that the colonel and Yang must have gotten the boy out of the laboratory. It was a lot of responsibility for Yang to handle by himself, but at the same time, Kalinin could imagine him giving them the slip.
He's one of yours, isn't he? Sagara Sosuke?
Kalinin managed not to show surprise at Sena's words. Not Yang, but Sosuke? Then something had happened to Yang, yet Tessa had made her way to Sosuke's apartment herself. "Assuming he is," Kalinin asked, "do you expect me to give you information about him?"
Not especially, Sena admitted. Your injuries are so severe, you'd probably die before I tortured it out of you.
"But then why did you save me?"
Because I wanted to talk to you, as I said. Besides, it doesn't matter to me who you people are.
"How can you be so sure?" Kalinin asked.
Because you don't appear affiliated with the police or the JSDF. Your actions are sporadic and weightless. You may be a skilled group of individuals, but you pose no real threat to us.
She was commenting on their inability, compared to the government organization, to bring material resources to bear. That was indeed one of Mithril's weaknesses. "You seem an excellent leader as well," Kalinin noted.
Do you think so? I know someone much better than me.
Sena didn't hesitate to admit she was their leader. Then, after falling silent for a few minutes, she asked,
Have you ever heard the name Takeshi Seiji?
her hopes didn't seem particularly high. "No."
He was a Japanese mercenary. He had his start in the Vietnam War, then traveled everywhere the Congo, Yemen, Nicaragua, Lebanon. Storied veteran, I believe is the term. He specialized in reconnaissance and survival.
There was a bit of affection in her voice now.
After serving with the Republic of Kurdistan during the Fifth Arab-Israeli conflict, he returned to Japan and launched a certain project. Can you guess what it was?
"Not a private security company, I imagine," Kalinin guessed dryly.
A welfare project, as part of an organization with the strange name of A21,
she said, with a trace of self-mockery for some reason.
His goal was the rehabilitation of juvenile delinquents, truly notorious ones guilty of the worst crimes imaginable. Armed robbers, manslaughterers, murderers, rapists, arsonists, etc., etc.
Kalinin listened silently.
Takeshi Seiji bought an abandoned island and released these irredeemables onto it. He trained them rigorously and thoroughly, teaching them his own survival and combat techniques. Even those who rebelled at first quickly came to follow him, because the island lacked not only electricity and plumbing, but also food. Following his teachings was the only way they could survive.
"It sounds very effective," Kalinin mused. "Yeah, I'll bet." "Just the proper incentives at the right spots and at the right time."
Yes, it was effective. He didn't preach love to his students. He showed them how to survive in a hostile environment, taught them more efficient methods of killing, and as a result gave them a resource known as self-confidence. They lost the need to dirty their hands with crime.
Heartwarming, Kalinin said, but I assume there is more to this story.
There is, Sena affirmed. A TV station caught wind of his training. They came to the island without permission, entered a warehouse on its outskirts, and poked around in his equipment. It caused an accident. 7 people died. She lowered her eyes pensively. He was ruined after that. The media began a feeding frenzy, ignoring the real cause of the accident. They treated him as if he was running a training school for terrorists. Some said he abused them, some said he was grooming them for terrorism. They were like hyenas on a kill. The police came around, and in the end his training facility was dissolved, and the pasts of his students were publicized. Her voice burned with cold anger. Even mine. The story of what a monstrous father did to his own daughter.
She likely wasn't just referring to physical abuse, but to far uglier acts. Kalinin could imagine that the father in question was long dead, and he could guess who it was who had taken him out. A21. They weren't mere terrorists, then, nor an extremist militia. Sena briskly walked up to him and leaned over, close enough that he could feel her breath from where he lay.
Do you know why I'm telling you all this?
Kalinin kept his face impassive. I don't know, was what he said, though he had an idea.
Because you remind me of him, she answered, of Takashi Seiji.
Kalinin was half Russian and half Estonian. He couldn't possibly look much like the Japanese man in the story, but perhaps he had a similar air. But that doesn't mean you'll release me, I suppose.
That's up to you, she said. Could I ask you one question?
Certainly.
If you were labeled a fraud and killed, and your subordinates went after those responsible, what would you think? Would you be happy?
I wouldn't think anything, Kalinin answered. I'd be worm food. The dead can't think.
How dull. Maybe I'll kill you after all, she said indifferently, pulling a gun from her belt.
I told you this conversation was pointless.
Yes, I was a fool to think otherwise. We have other things to focus on.
Revenge, you mean? Kalinin asked.
Sena thought for a moment. I never thought about it that way. We just want to add a bit of our own color to a city saturated with peace. If you call that revenge, then I suppose that's what it is. To spread all-consuming destruction, to tear the town apart with flames of fear. That's what I desire.
Her motivation was an all-abiding emptiness. The others were likely the same way. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was the product of a cold fury built up over years. A fundamental rebellion against the world itself. That was her sole driving force. Kalinin had seen many like her in his time. Sena pointed her gun at him.
I'm going to find your subordinate, Sagara Sosuke. I will kill him and anyone else with him. Then I'll bring Takuma back.
To use the Lambda Driver? Invoking that word was a calculated risk for Kalinin, an expert in escaping such dangerous situations. Given what was about to happen, he had to make him and his associates as interesting to her as possible. Inclining them to keep Tessa for interrogation could mean the difference between life and death for her. Indeed, Sena's thin eyebrow moved just a tad, registering surprise.
You know about that, too? I'm surprised.
You must be curious about me now. She returned the gun to its holster and looked down at him with an air of detachment.
I am, far more than before.
She turned around and headed for the cabin's exit. By the way, Kalinin asked her as she left, what's Takashi Seiji doing now?
Sena stopped. He's dead. Hanged himself in jail. It was a tragedy.
Chapter 3. He Who Chases Two Hares. 26 June, 21:40 hours, Japan Standard Time. Fushimidai Academy High School, Chofu.
I came here a lot for student council in my first year, Kaname explained. It's a hoity-toity escalator school, but the uniforms are uggo. Also, the teachers are the worst. Every time we came by, they were all, "You aren't from this school. What are you doing here?"
The school looked more or less like Jindai from the outside, an unadorned facade of reinforced concrete. Sosuke easily got them through the school's basic security system. They avoided the custodian's office and made their way to the student council room on the north building's second floor. Kaname had insisted that she knew it very well and that it was the most comfortable room for them to hole up in for now. At last they were able to sit down and breathe easy. Takuma, conscious again already, had been sat down next to Sosuke.
Want some tea?
Kaname asked, rummaging around in a corner of the dim room.
No, thank you,
Tessa responded. It seemed that wherever she went today, there was always a hot drink of some kind on offer.
Oh, yeah? Kaname replied huffily. So, anyway, we just need to kill time here, right?
Yes, we have reinforcements on the way as we speak, Sosuke confirmed. He'd already contacted them again through his satellite communicator. A transport helicopter carrying Mao, Kurtz, and the M9 left the Tuat Dadanan over the Pacific and was expected to land on the school lawn. Had left the Tuat Dadanan over the Pacific and was expected to land on the school lawn within 2 hours.
My allies will be here first. Changing your hiding place won't save you,
Takuma said.
We fixed that problem, actually,
Kaname said. Takuma looked at her questioningly.
My microwave took out your little transmitter,
Kaname boasted. For the first time, Takuma's expression became serious. He must have known about the transmitter. There was no need to tell him it was broken, Sosuke thought, but he also couldn't see how it had done any harm, so he refrained from comment. The enemy currently had no way of finding them. It would be one thing if they had gone to Jindai High, but there was no paper trail tying them to this school. They could probably rest easy, for now.
Anyway,
Kaname pulled her PHS from the back pocket of her denim miniskirt. Oh, you have denim pockets. That's convenient. On a miniskirt, no less. Distracted. Sosuke scowled as he realized what she was doing. Who are you going to call? He asked.
Kyoko.
Why?
I told you before, I gotta ask her to record a drama, Kaname said impatiently. It's starting soon.
Don't tell her where you are, Sosuke commanded.
But Kaname bristled. You know, I could watch it on the TV in here, but if I did that, the custodian might find out and get us in trouble. I'm trying to be considerate. You're the one who got me mixed up in all this, remember?
Sosuke fell silent.
You'd better adjust your attitude around me in the future, oh great and wise Sergeant Sagara Sosuke. Get it?
Whenever Sosuke treated Kaname as an ordinary civilian and rank amateur, it usually backfired on him like this. Lacking a proper response, he just looked down and began to play idly with his submachine gun. Tessa just stared in disbelief. Kaname spun the jog dial on her PHS and pressed the button. She must have had it on silent mode because it didn't even beep.
The second there's a crisis, you immediately promote yourself to coolest guy in the room. It's a gross habit. You should work on it,
She said nastily, then immediately switched to a cheerful tone.
Oh, is this the Tokiwo residence? Hey, it's Chidori. Oh, hey. Yeah, I got it. It was so good. Yeah. Yeah, could you? Thanks a bunch. By the way, Kyoko, hey, I've got a huge favor to ask you.
Sakara-san, does she always yell at you like this? Tessa whispered to him. Not technically always, he hedged.
I don't understand, she said. You're far more experienced and knowledgeable than she is.
Well, that's not necessarily always the case.
Really?
Really. She's very quick-witted at times. Sosuke slumped over a little, fiddling with the rear sight adjustment knob. Tessa looked at him with a scowl.
I feel like you listen to her more readily than you listen to me, Sakara-san.
No, ma'am, he denied automatically. That's not the case at all.
I wonder. I'm not convinced.
Tessa turned away.
This is so nerve-wracking,
Sosuke thought. He was just trying to do what he had to in order to see his mission through. How had he ended up with Tessa and Kaname butting heads?
Just what did I do wrong?
He'd never looked forward to reinforcements so much in his life.
Mao, Kurtz, anyone, just get here as soon as you can.
Before long, Kaname finished her call.
Boy, schools sure are creepy at night, huh?
She mused, slipping the PHS back into her pocket. Then she leaned forward.
I don't know about this place, but Jindai High has a lot of ghost stories, you know? Typical stuff like Toilet Hanako.
What's frightening about her? Sosuke wanted to know. Does she have a bomb strapped to her chest?
That sounds like the title of an indecent video.
Tessa frowned. Kaname was disappointed by their ignorant responses.
Fine, whatever. There's also the epic tale of the yokai Ebizori Kozo. It's a terrifying ghost story told only at Jindai High.
What is it about?
Well, you see...
What is it about?
Well, you see...
Responding to Tessa's interest, Kaname leaned over the desk and began whispering in her ear. Whatever she said caused Tessa's ears to turn red for just a moment before all the color drained from her face.
That's perverted, she gasped. Well, scary, huh? Oh my God, I would die if I met someone like that.
As Tessa shuddered, Sosuke watched, head tilted in confusion. Just then they heard footsteps in the hallway. They seemed to be coming from far away, around the stairs. They were headed their way, slowly and leisurely. Then they stopped in front of a room. A door opened, then closed again.
It's the custodian. He's going to check in here, too.
Kaname clicked her tongue.
Hide under the desk. Hurry.
Sosuke pointed the gun at Takuma and got him to do as he was told.
Don't say a word. Let's see. Will I or won't I?
Takuma said with his usual faint smile. There were a number of document-filled cardboard boxes stored under the desk, leaving barely enough space for the four of them to cram in together. They held their collective breaths as they heard the custodian unlock the door and open it. His flashlight pierced the darkness of the room.
If he's just on patrol, he should move along quickly,
Sosuke thought. And yet...
Hey, you there! Come on out!
Came a hoarse voice. Sosuke followed the flashlight's beam, and at the end of it saw Tessa's little cargo pants-clad behind poking out from beneath the desk.
That's what they call hiding your head but not your ass, the old custodian chuckled as he led them down the dark hallway. But I didn't expect the head to belong to a pretty foreign girl. This is quite a night. Playing war with your toy guns, were you?
Uh-huh.
The four of them were following the old man in a line. Tessa brought up the rear, looking stricken.
Come on in,
the old man said as they arrived at his office on the first floor. The others followed him in, despondently. It was a small but modest Japanese-style room. They took off their shoes as they entered, then found seats around the low table.
Would you like some tea? He asked.
No, thank you,
the four of them, sans Takuma, replied in chorus. They were definitely sick of hot drinks by now.
Ah, don't be that way. I've got the good stuff.
Without waiting for their assent, the custodian brought some teacups from his kitchen. He poured hot water from a pot next to the table into a teapot with the leaves already inside.
The school, Takuma said suddenly, without prompting. You called it Fushimidai Academy, didn't you?
So what? Sosuke wanted to know.
Oh, nothing,
Takuma replied innocently.
I thought maybe I'd been here once before.
Sosuke narrowed his eyes quietly.
Probably just my imagination. Forget I said anything.
It was Takama's first time talking like this. Something was wrong. What are you plotting? Sosuke demanded.
What do you mean?
Takama replied. Do you think you can escape us?
No, I've seen how good you are.
Sosuke continued to scrutinize Takama, who seemed unfazed by his attention.
Sosuke, you need to stop being so suspicious of everyone, Kaname scolded, even if they are creepazoids who lose their temper over stupid things.
The old custodians set out their tea.
I don't know what brought you all here. Just make sure you get back before the trains stop running. Your parents will be worried. Don't worry, I won't tell the school.
We're sorry about all the trouble we've caused.
Kaname bowed low to him. Of course, neither she nor Sosuke nor Tessa, probably, actually had parents worried about them, but they weren't about to point that out.
Takuma-san, do you have any family?
Tessa asked.
A big sister, that's it.
What kind of person is she?
I see no need to talk about it.
Takama answered, with greater irritation than really seemed warranted.
I see. But we're only running around like this because we've chosen to keep you alive, Tessa explained. The least you could do is make it conversation to help us pass the time.
Is there a question mark there? Did I misread that? Sorry, it's a page flip. Nope, there's no question mark.
The least you could do is make conversation to help us pass the time.
Takama said nothing.
I have an older brother, Tessa said, gazing at the tea stalk at the bottom of her cup. I don't know where he is right now, but he's a much more impressive person than I. Ah, so I guess he doesn't trip over railings or try to hide behind desks with his butt sticking up?
Kaname interjected with a laugh. Tessa shot her a glare.
Let me ask you this, Chidori-san. Can you solve Einstein's field equations with no prior knowledge?
Huh?
I did that at 6 years old, Tessa told her, but my brother did it at 4.
Kaname's mouth dropped open.
I don't know what that means, but I guess it's pretty amazing. Yes, quite amazing. I've always had an inferiority complex regarding my brother.
She took an indifferent sip of tea.
And?
Takama asked out of nowhere.
What?
Tessa looked over in surprise.
And? He repeated. How did you get along with your brother? Well, I suppose the closest way of putting it would be he protected me. It wasn't exactly a healthy relationship, she said in a rather gloomy voice.
She's understating things considerably, as we will eventually learn. There's understatements, and then there's like massive understatements, and then there's what she just said. It is a drastic understatement. It's pretty bad. We'll get there. Not this book. It'll be a while. The author is playing the long game. It's gonna be a minute, but we will get there.
It wasn't exactly a healthy relationship, she said in a rather gloomy voice. But that was a long time ago. Takuma-san, do you have an inferiority complex about your sister, too? What did you... You do, don't you?
Tessa peered into Takama's face as he snapped back to reality and tried to deny it. He seemed a little flustered at first, but perhaps realizing it was foolish to get worked up, he just shrugged.
Yeah, maybe it is an inferiority complex. I worship my big sister. That's the first time you've told us anything about yourself, Tessa observed.
Takama fell silent, pursing his lips and looking down at the floor. That was the end of their talk about families. The next 40 minutes passed uneventfully. There was no sign of the enemy coming. This was only natural, since they had no way of finding them. Kaname watched her drama with the custodian. Tessa rested her head on the coffee table and slept, citing sleep deprivation. Takama sat quietly next to Sosuke, legs crossed and eyes closed. Once his shoulders began heaving and he showed signs of agitation, but he seemed to reclaim his reason before it escalated to an outburst. The show ended, the commercials played, and Kaname stood up. "Where are you going?" Sosuke asked as she headed for the door.
What kind of jerk asks a girl that? She retorted.
"What do you mean?" Sosuke furrowed his brow. He genuinely didn't seem to understand her objection. Kaname turned red and stammered,
The bathroom, okay?
"Ah,
I'll accompany you.
Tessa got up abruptly and followed after her. "For safety's sake," Sosuke began, "I also should—"
Stay here.
Kaname and Tessa commanded in unison.
Boy, talk about a lack of tact.
Kaname grumbled.
I'm sure we'll be fine, Sagara-san.
Tessa said to reassure him.
All right, Sosuke relented, but don't turn on any lights, and keep your voices down.
Reluctantly, Sosuke sat himself back down. The two left him behind and headed for the first floor girls' bathroom. The corridor was dark. The only illumination came from the street lamps outside, and the red lights over the school's fire hoses. The fluorescent lights over the emergency exits let out a dull, eerie hum. Schools really were creepy at night.
You tagged along awfully quickly, Kaname observed. Afraid of going by yourself?
Well, yes, Tessa admitted.
You said all those awful things before.
Kaname gave a sinister chuckle.
It appears in hallways just like this, you know. The episodic kozo. Stop it.
They arrived at the girls' bathroom before too long. Kaname left Tessa to take her own stall. She reached for the hem of her miniskirt, then started in confusion. Her PHS was no longer in her back pocket. She tried her other pockets, but it wasn't there either.
Maybe I dropped it in the custodian's room?
She wondered. That seemed unlikely, though. There had been nothing on the tatami floor when she got up from the TV. Could it be in the student council room, then? She finished her business, then went out to wash her hands, feeling uneasy all the while. Tessa was still in her stall.
Chidori-san, please don't go yet,
A voice said nervously through the door.
Oh? Let me think about that,
She replied with exaggerated meanness, then strode into the hallway. Suddenly she felt a presence behind her. She turned around to face it. A man stood there, dressed in an all-black combat uniform and wearing a mask. There was a glinting combat knife in his hand. Kaname sucked in a breath, but before she could scream, the knife flashed. Its honed point stopped a millimeter short of cutting open her throat. Then the man grabbed her shoulder and pulled her toward him.
Not one sound, came a vicious whisper.
The eyes visible through the holes in the mask flashed a clear warning.
If you try to scream, I'll kill you.
There was another man in black moving around in the darkness, too. He was standing next to the door to the girls' bathroom, drawing a knife from a chest sheath. He was probably waiting for Tessa to come out. A sticky sort of fear began to bind around her heart. Nevertheless, her prevailing thought was the surprisingly cool-headed,
I'm glad I went to the bathroom first.
There was the sound of running water, and then of the door opening.
Chidori-san, are you still here?
Kaname wanted to shout, "Run!" but her instincts stopped her. If she screamed, she was dead. Besides, screaming wouldn't guarantee the other girl's escape. The only way out would be through the bathroom window, and there was no way someone so clumsy would be able to make it out that way.
Sosuke, she thought, so it was all true.
He'd said they were being pursued, but she'd written him off, assuming he was exaggerating, the way he always did. But she'd been wrong. And now she was back where she had been 2 months ago. This was his house now, the battlefield.
Chidori-san, please stop teasing.
The clueless Tessa stepped out, and the man lying in wait swung his arm down. They're late, Sosuke thought, looking at his wristwatch. 15 minutes had passed since they had left. Were they wandering around the school building? Were they discussing something? He opened the door and looked out into the hallway, but there was no sign of the girls heading back.
I wonder what called, the custodian said idly I wonder what happened, the custodian said idly as he watched the news.
I'm going to go check on them. Hey, get up, Sosuke ordered Takuma. There was no way he could leave him alone in this room. Just then he heard an electronic beeping. It was a Mozart melody, tinny and cheerful, the incoming call sound for Kaname's PHS. It was coming from Takuma's pocket.
Got me, eh?
Takuma pulled the phone from his pocket, smiling in triumph. He must have swiped it when they were cramming under the desk in the student council room. Everything then became clear for Sosuke. That suspicious line from Takuma before.
The school. You called it Fushimidai Academy, didn't you?
He must have been on the line with his allies at the time. He'd kept the line open and spoken the school's name, revealing to them his current location. Damn you! Sosuke fumed. He'd been careless. Takuma might be inclined to lose his mind and lash out, but in his lucid state he could be quite clever. He wasn't stupid by any means. Close to 1 hour had passed since then. An hour since the enemy had learned their location. There was no sign of anyone around the custodian's room but Kaname and Tessa.
Don't you want to answer it?
Takuma preferred the ringing PHS. Sosuke took it, submachine gun still at the ready. He pressed the call button and heard an unfamiliar man's voice on the other line.
Sagara Sosuke.
Yes, he said at last.
I have the 2 women. Bring him out to the yard. You have 1 minute.
The call cut off. They had Kaname and Tessa, which meant that they were alive. Sosuke allowed himself a moment's relief. Perhaps the enemy hated indiscriminate attacks that resulted in casualties. They'd also lost 3 of their own already. It was natural they'd want hostages this time. The situation was serious. There was good visibility on the lawn. It would make Sosuke a sitting duck for sniper fire. Only a fool would just walk out into an environment like that, even with hostages on the line, and he wasn't the kind of man to just walk into a trap and take his chances. If he was going to go out there, he needed a plan of his own. But what kind of plan? 1 minute was hardly long enough to think of an effective countermeasure. Oh, sorry. I added a singular qualifier to that. It's plural. 1 minute was hardly long enough to think of effective countermeasures. I'll just have to gamble then. Sosuke turned back to the custodian. Could I ask you for a favor?
Yes.
He explained his request, and the old man looked suspicious.
So, if I hear any loud sounds, I'm to turn on the field lights, you say?
The idea was to temporarily blind the enemies, whose eyes would be more adjusted to the dark.
I'll get a tongue lashing, you know.
I know that, but something much worse will happen if you don't. Sosuke couldn't force the man to say yes. He just held his breath while the old custodian gazed into the night in deep contemplation.
Well, all right, but just for a little while.
He stood up, saying no more than that. Thank you. Sosuke immediately turned around and headed swiftly toward the school's exit with Takuma in tow. On the way, he used handcuffs to lash Takuma's wrist to his own. His submachine gun hung off his shoulder. He took a grenade out of his pocket and removed the pin with his mouth. If he released the lever now, it would explode on the spot.
Why don't you just stop resisting already?
Takuma wanted to know. I commend you for your clever trick back there, but now be quiet, Sosuke advised him. I'm a little on edge. As he came outside, he could see 4 silhouettes across the dark athletics field, just under the high bars. 2 men in combat uniforms, with Kaname and Tessa bound up behind them. He could sense someone on the school's roof, one on top of the gymnasium as well. Those were perfect sniping positions, but also made them easier to spot. Sosuke held up his hands, both the one shackled to Takuma's and the one holding the grenade. If you shoot me, he dies, he shouted. If Sosuke was shot, his hand would release the grenade lever, and it would explode. Since Takuma was handcuffed to him, he would invariably die as well. The man in front of Kaname took a step forward.
Just give him to us and we won't hurt you. Remove the handcuffs.
You call that a negotiation? Balance the tables a little more, Sosuke said rebelliously. He understood how a terrorist with a hostage felt now.
All right,
The man said after a moment.
I'll send one of the girls over to you. Will you take off the handcuffs then?
Very well, Sosuke replied curtly.
If you're lying, the man said, we'll take an ear off the other.
As you wish.
So, which woman should we release first?
The man asked. Sosuke considered. Whoever was released first would be safer, since she would be with him. That meant the second would be in danger. A fight could break out while he was swapping the second girl for Takuma. Kaname or Tessa? Logically speaking, Kaname should come first. She wasn't part of Mithril and had nothing to do with any of this. Basically, she was an innocent victim. But if he left Tessa behind, would she be able to get to safety if hostilities broke out? He felt a little bad thinking it, but she wasn't exactly athletic. If he didn't release her first, her chances of survival would be low. No, almost certainly nil. By comparison, Kaname was a swift runner. She was often asked to help out with the school's athletics clubs. Releasing Tessa first and betting on Kaname's athletic abilities to carry her through would be a more surefire way to save them both, wouldn't it? This is a dilemma, he thought. Who should he choose? Tessa or Kaname? They were both staring at him across the dark field. What were they thinking? What were their expectations? He had no way to ask, so, in the end, he decided to go with the best chance of saving both of them. In other words, release the Caucasian woman first, the Japanese woman second. Both looked equally surprised by his choice. He felt like Kaname's eyes had widened at him questioningly. I just have to trust in Chidori, Sosuke thought. I know that she can do anything. He wanted to shout that to her, but he couldn't. It would be like telling the enemy that he was about to make trouble.
Very well,
the man responded, removing Tessa's handcuffs and nudging her in the back. She put up a show of resistance, but he shoved her again, harder. She had no choice but to begin walking towards Sosuke. As she got closer, he could tell that she was angry. Extremely angry. Colonel, he said tersely, get behind me. I appreciate it, Sergeant Sagara, but this was the wrong decision. To ensure the safety of both of you, did you really think I'm not prepared for moments like these? Tessa demanded coldly. It's insulting. Sosuke had no response to that. His decision to prioritize her safety in defiance of conventional logic must have badly wounded her pride, and the tentatively amicable relationship they'd built up had collapsed as a result. You can scold me for it later, he managed, then addressed Takuma. The key is in my right pocket. Use it to free yourself. Takuma silently reached into Sosuke's pants pocket, found the key, and unlocked the handcuffs. They're off! Sosuke shouted at the man.
Start him walking. I'll start her walking at the same time. Acceptable?
The man released Kaname's restraints as he made his offer. If he believed it would be that easy, Sosuke would gladly have acted in good faith, but he had killed 3 of this man's comrades. There was no way that the exchange could end peacefully. Very well, Sosuke said. Let's proceed. It was time for Sosuke to abandon his lifeline, to return Takuma to the enemy. Tessa showed no objection to this, so Sosuke shot him a signal and the boy began to walk. Kaname came toward them, likewise from the other end of the field. A sniper's bullet could strike at any second now. Takuma's proximity was likely the only thing staying their hands. When I give the signal, run to the school building, Sosuke said. Tessa's refusal was immediate. Run and hide, you mean? You'll be in danger if you don't. I did what you said back at the apartment, she said flatly, but our circumstances have changed. Colonel! While they argued, Kaname and Takuma passed each other at the center of the field. Sosuke could sense a new wave of hostility coming from the snipers positioned on the school and the gym. He was out of time. They were in danger. He had to. He released the grenade's lever, shouted, "Run!" then threw the grenade toward the gym, right into the sniper's sight line. It detonated in midair. The explosion would hide him from the sniper on the roof. By the time the explosion came, Sosuke had already turned his submachine gun toward the second sniper on the school building. He could see the man through his sight, aiming back at him. The sniper was faster. If he pulled the trigger. Just then, light flooded over the field. The old custodian had flipped the switch. Sosuke could now see the sniper very clearly. The man fired desperately, blinded by the light. His bullet hit the ground 30 centimeters to Sosuke's right. Oh my gosh, that actually rhymes.
Blinded by the light. His bullet hit the ground 30 centimeters to Sosuke's right.
Yeah, whatever. It sounded funny in my head. It wasn't funny. Sorry.
Revved up like a deuce. Another runner in the night.
For anyone wondering what those lyrics actually are. A deuce being like a deuce coupe. It's a car thing. It's a car. Sosuke steadied his aim and let out a burst. 3 casings spat out from his gun, falling to the ground. The sniper reeled back and fell out of sight. Now the one on the gym, he thought, turning around. That's when he saw it. His jaw dropped. Out on the brightly illuminated field, Kaname was doing the unbelievable. She hadn't run to safety. She had turned to grapple with Takuma. Was she trying to use him as a shield? He'd been right to believe that she would take the initiative, but he never dreamed she would go this far. What in the world was she? "I'll help!" Tessa cried, and ran directly toward the fray. He had no time to stop her. She made a beeline to Kaname, who was tangled up with Takuma on the ground. "Colonel!" Sosuke bellowed. He didn't have time to stop her. The sniper on the gym, having recovered from the initial explosion, was taking aim again. Sosuke threw himself forward as a bullet's impact raised a cloud of dust behind him. He came out of his roll and returned fire, but the motion compromised his aim, and the man was too far away. His bullets sparked futilely against the gym's curved roof. A rifle had a range and power far superior to that of a submachine gun. The enemy sniper must have realized this advantage because he stayed right where he was and kept firing. 2 shots, 3 shots, 4. Herded along by the close-range assault, Sosuke ran past a flower bed. Chips of brick, clumps of soil, and vines from morning glories burst around him. He managed to make it to a concrete drinking fountain and hid behind the waist-high basin to check on Kaname and Tessa. Kaname was still grappling with Takuma at the center of the field. Tessa had run away. Tessa had run up and was trying to separate them. Their former captor was also on his way, pistol in hand. With a feeling of dread, Sosuke aimed his submachine gun at the man running toward the girls. His attempt was checked, though, by another shot from the gym. It chipped a shard off the basin that cut his cheek. The sniper seemed to have no interest in the girls, because they were tangled up with Takuma, most likely. His focus was keeping Sosuke down while his comrade secured their target. There's nothing I can do, Sosuke thought. He'd made 2 serious miscalculations. One was about Kaname, the other was about Tessa. Neither had tried to run away. If they had, he might have been able to escape while keeping the sniper in check. He'd never expected his plan to backfire like this. Sosuke looked up to check the conditions at the gym, and his heart sank. The sniper was readying a new weapon, a disposable MPATS. M-P-A-T-S. It was a weapon that could put a hole in a steel wall or a pillbox. The basin wouldn't stand a chance. The rocket fired. Trailing smoke, the shaped charge flew toward Sosuke. There was an explosion, and the sink was blasted to smithereens. Empats, and I'm not totally positive of this, I think is man-portable anti-tank system. I'm not sure what the S is, but it's probably man-portable anti-tank something or other. In fact, the S might be something or other. Anyway, it blows a thing up. A basin. A few seconds before...
Get away! Tessa yelled. Get to safety! Why did you come back?
Kaname shouted in surprise as she yanked on Takama's cheek and ear.
I'll be the decoy. You go and...
Tessa was interrupted by a massive explosion. She felt the shockwave in her stomach first, just before the wall of heat slammed into them. She looked over in shock. Black smoke was rising from a corner of the field where there had once been a water fountain. Shredded concrete rained down. Water geysered from the broken pipe, giving rise to a thick mist. Sosuke was gone. There was no sign of him anywhere. Could he have been... Could the blast have... Ah... Kaname and Tessa were dumbstruck. While they stood there, the man in black caught up to them. He had a large automatic pistol in his hand. At this range, there could be no escape.
He's dead,
The man declared. Tessa said nothing.
run if you want,
The man in black suggested.
or don't. All that it'll change is if the bullet goes in your front or your back.
Then Takama got up and said,
Wait, you can't kill them yet.
Why the hell not?
The man in black demanded to know.
She's... No, never mind.
Takama lowered his eyes again. The man tilted his head, then spoke into his headset.
Target secured. I'm killing the others.
He listened for a response, then snorted dubiously.
What? But Sana. Well, if you insist.
The man sighed and threw a set of handcuffs to each of them.
Put those on. You'll be coming with me. Don't run or you're dead.
June 23:27 hours. Japan Standard Time. Akami Pier, Koto Ward, Tokyo. Andre Kalainen lay in bed, staring up at the reddish-brown ceiling. There was no clock in the room, but he could tell it wasn't midnight yet. Straining his ears, he heard the sounds of factory machines, the roar of motor tools and capacitors, the operation of cranes, the scraping of metal against metal. A cargo hold, Kalainen deduced. From time to time came the faint whir of turbines. There must be a generator, a big one, undergoing tests nearby. They were building something in the cargo hold. Or maybe they'd already built it, and they were running final checks? An AS, most likely, a special one. A machine they would use to wreak havoc in the city. The metal door opened, and Sena stepped in.
How are you feeling?
Do you really have to ask? Kalainen asked, with a glance at his blood-darkened bandages.
You're not dead yet, Sena shrugged. Gentleman though you may be, you can clearly take some punishment.
True, Kalainen agreed. I'm tough enough not to hang myself, at least. The reference to her teacher didn't alter Sena's expression. She just walked up to him and put her left hand onto his arm. His bandaged left arm. She pressed a fingertip into his wound, and pain shot down his left side.
Are you calling him a coward?
She asked. That's entirely up to you, Kalainen responded, enduring the pain with a will of iron.
What do you mean by that?
She asked. Your teacher, Takechi Seiji, exists nowhere now except inside of you. Your behavior determines what's true about him. That's all. Kalainen returned. When a line like that hit a nerve, it suggested it was on the person's mind. If Sena truly believed that he wasn't a coward, she'd have brushed the comment off with a scornful laugh. Seeming to realize that he was right, Sena relaxed her grip and turned away.
You're a curious one, less of a soldier and more of a clergyman.
You're the first one who's ever said that, but I can't say I find it unappealing, Kalainen responded. Then, surprisingly, Sena smiled. It was a real smile, not the cold, derisive smile she flashed him from time to time.
A priest's garb and a Bible. It really might suit you, she said.
Perhaps, he allowed.
It would.
She put a hand on his chest, this time gently.
It's a shame.
What is?
If only you and I had... No.
She took a step back before the fatal words came out. It's not too late, he told her.
No, it is too late.
Her voice was its usual ice again. Sena turned back to the door and told him,
You were my enemy from the start, spared only by a moment's caprice. Once you tell me what you know about the Lambda Driver, I'll have no further need for you.
I won't tell you anything, Kalainen disagreed.
Won't you?
Sena stopped.
Sakara Sosuke, your man is dead. The girls accompanying him are headed here now with Takuma. Perhaps I'll get it out of them while you watch.
Kalainen said nothing.
Takuma is going to pilot that devil, she announced. He'll use its power to rebel against the world that rejected that man. It's very clear, isn't it? I am your enemy.
June 23:34 hours, Japan Standard Time. Fushimidai Academy High School, Chofu. How long have I been out? Sosuke wondered. He was lying face down, his back peppered with glass and concrete fragments. Glass and concrete fragments. There we go. Better. He was lying face down, his back peppered with glass and concrete fragments. He picked himself up and took stock of his injuries. Some mild scrapes and bruises, no more. His body armor had stopped most of it. Sosuke knelt there silently. He'd been lying on the floor of the ground-level nurse's office. It was right behind the water fountain, and he'd thrown himself through the window just before the rocket went off. Though he'd managed to get clear, the blast and the shockwave had still knocked him unconscious. Chidori and the colonel, where are they? He stood up, shaky on his feet. He peered through the soot-stained window frame. The field lights were already out again, the girls nowhere to be seen. They must have been taken away with Takuma. That was better than seeing them both laid out dead, but... Damn, what a mess. There was no excuse for the degree to which he'd failed. He'd shamed the name Uruz 7, the call sign given only to Mithril's most elite SRT combatants. In reality, a less brilliant soldier would have been killed during the initial shootout, but Sosuke wasn't going to think of that just now. What in the world is going on here? The custodian, who'd just arrived, asked. It's just what it looks like, Sosuke told him grimly. They got me. How am I supposed to explain this to the principal? The custodian wondered. Make something up, Sosuke suggested. We'll reimburse you. Just then, the long-awaited arrival came. He heard the sound of rotors and turbine blades spinning at high speeds. A gentle wind brushed the field, which quickly became a punishing gale. A CH-67 transport helicopter, rendered invisible via ECS, was descending on the school grounds. It was too late. If it had only come 10 minutes earlier.
Gabo 9 to Uruz 7, the package has arrived,
He heard through his earphone radio. It was from the helicopter's pilot.
Uruz 7 here. Roger. I'm on my way.
Sosuke responded sullenly, climbing out of the window and into the yard. It had been invisible the entire time, but the helicopter had apparently landed. It quickly dropped its cargo, then flew away again. Silence returned to the schoolyard. Once the dust had settled, Sosuke could make out a large silhouette crouching in the dark. Standing straight, it would be roughly 8 meters tall. It was one of Mithril's cutting-edge arm slaves, the M9 Gernsback. It was dark gray, with a complex array of armored plates that combined both curved and straight lines. It had a slender silhouette, with a pinched waist, and its head, mounted with dual machine guns and copious sensors, resembled a person in a fighter pilot's helmet. The hard point on its back held a short-barreled rifle and a capacitor pack to store excess energy. At the M9's feet stood Sosuke's colleagues, Master Sergeant Melissa Mao and Sergeant Kurtz Weber. Mithril typically worked in teams of 3, and these two were frequently paired with Sosuke. She was an East Asian with black hair and dark eyes, and he was a young, blonde, blue-eyed German. Both were dressed in their Mithril AS operator uniforms, ninja-like outfits which doubled as combat uniforms. Each had rich pops of color. On, oh, I thought I was going crazy. Sorry. Each had rich pops of color on the collar and shoulders. Mao's were violet and Kurtz's were cobalt blue. Kurtz Weber was the first to speak.
So, where are my cute girls?
Silently, Melissa Mao kicked him in the rump. June 20, 0021 hours, Japan Standard Time, Tama Riverbank, Kokuryocho, Chofu, Tokyo. They had decided to get away from the battle site before getting into details. The sniper that Sosuke had shot had no longer been on the roof. Maybe he was dead and his friends had carried him off, or maybe he had only been injured. There was no way of knowing. The M9 had an invisibility capable ECS, so if they moved carefully, they could get around unnoticed. As always, of course, there were missteps. They'd come just short of kicking a drunkard, for instance, and gotten tangled up in some power lines. They'd stopped by Sosuke's apartment on the way and picked up their K-truck, purchased second-hand in the name of a Mithril intelligence agent, in the parking lot. Once they'd made it to the Tama River, they gathered around the vehicle on the bank. The M9 remained invisible. The burning ozone smell of the ECS hung in the air around them. It was dark around the river terrace, but they could see young people playing with fireworks in the distance. The constant bang, bang, bang kept Sosuke on edge. He completed his explanation, and Mao let out a sigh.
If only we'd gotten here just a little sooner, I could have had the M9 trace him back.
Any chance for more reinforcements? Sosuke asked.
Not for a while, she told him gloomily. It's been a madhouse for the Dadanan these last few days, and we don't have the Major.
Major Kalainen was missing, which meant that Mao was in de facto command. Normally, one of the captains that served as Kalainen's aides would step in, but they were all south of China on a top-secret operation, as were the other Uru's code-name combatants. It was unusual for the Tuatha Dé Danann to have so much to do at once, and that was before you even got to the fact that its operations commander was MIA and its commander-in-chief was in mortal danger.
We just don't have enough people, she lamented. Not enough people.
Sosuke lowered his eyes, taking her words as a criticism of his inability to protect the girls.
I'm sorry. Don't get the wrong idea, Sosuke. I know there's only so much you could have done. She disagreed. You had 3 people in tow, fighting alone against a heavily armed enemy organization. Nobody could have done better, outside of maybe James Bond.
Mao stretched out on the hood of the truck. Sosuke was stunned by her take on the situation. He didn't know a lot about Melissa Mao. She was in her mid-20s, but she looked a little younger and had large, vaguely feline, almond-shaped eyes. Though her short black hair gave her a brisk, lively air, she typically moved with a kind of leisurely grace. Maybe she'd been more rugged as a child. Mao was a New York-born Chinese American, and before Mithril, she'd been in the U.S. Marines. Most armed forces wouldn't let women on the front lines, but she must have gained combat experience somehow. Mithril wouldn't have scouted her for their active forces otherwise. She clearly had some kind of complicated past. She was every bit the combatant Sosuke was, and on top of that, had a specialist's knowledge of electronics and AS tech. Mao's solid judgment and ability to foster amicable relations with others was what made her an effective team leader. She was always finding offhand ways, as now, of being considerate of Sosuke. There were probably even times she did it and he didn't even notice. Of course, there was probably no more to it than a general sense of responsibility she felt as their team leader. That more or less summed up Mao.
We can't count on much support, she continued, so we'll have to work this out by ourselves. First, we'll pursue. Then we'll monitor. Then we'll take them down, probably.
I guess that's our only choice. Kurtz broke off in a yawn.
Mao glared at him.
You want to maybe try taking this seriously?
Hey, he protested. I am taking it seriously.
Kaname's in trouble too, remember? The girl who saved your life?
I know that. That's why I'm fighting so hard to stay awake. If it was anyone other than Kaname and Tessa, I'd be home in bed with a drink by now, Kurtz grumbled. I'm serious.
You little...
Mao grumbled.
What's the deal with this Takuma brat anyway? Kurtz asked, attempting to move on. Has he got superpowers? Can he pour vodka up his ass and fart fire or stick a stack of coins up his nose?
Not sure I'd want to fight a terrorist organization that fought to retrieve someone like that.
She sighed.
I was kidding.
I'd take you off the team if you weren't.
Kurtz folded his arms as if ignoring her.
Anyway, getting serious, I wonder if Takuma's, like Kaname, one of those whispered types.
It's a thought.
Mao considered for a bit, but Sosuke spoke first.
The colonel seemed to know, but I don't think Takuma is like Kaname. He's something even more unusual. What are you basing that on, Sosuke?
Mao asked curiously.
Well, instinct. I don't think I've ever heard you talk about instinct before.
She frowned.
It's refreshing, yet unsettling. Leave me alone.
Sosuke sulked. Just then, they each got a call on their radio headsets. It was coming from the M9 right beside them.
There we go. What's the word, Friday?
Mao said, licking her lips. Friday was the call sign for the machine's AI. Master Sergeant, information on subject B3 received by Tuat Dedanan. The Metropolitan Police's monitoring system cited the car in question 50 seconds ago. Acting under the assumption that the girls had been taken by the black van Sosuke had seen on the way out of the apartment, the Dedanan had hacked the local speed cameras to look for it. Mithril had the tech to infiltrate most police and army computer systems.
Where is it?
Mao asked. Shuto Expressway, Route 11, Koto Ward, Rainbow Bridge, the lane headed for Odaiba.
Good. Tighten the net and continue surveillance. If it pings any more monitoring systems in the area, let us know.
What do I get out of it?
Candy.
Roger. The AI fell silent.
Big sis?
Kurtz asked suspiciously.
Are you teaching it weird words again?
Got a problem with that? Mao retorted. It's my AI. Now, we basically know where they're headed.
The harbor?
He guessed. Most likely. If they don't trigger cameras for any of the surrounding roads, we'll know they're near Odaiba. Odaiba, there we go. And once we're in the area...
Her tracker.
Precisely.
Their enemy wasn't the only one using that hoary old method of tracing someone with a homing device. With Kaname at risk of being kidnapped at any time, Sosuke had her wearing a necklace with a miniature transceiver in it. Mithril had a few other safeguards in place to protect her, but even Kaname wasn't likely to know about those. Even if the enemy realized she had that necklace, it would be too late. The team already knew they were in the harbor district. They'd just have the Dedanan's mother AI run a search on the warehouses and boats entering port.
I'll take the M9. You two take the truck, Mao ordered. I'll send you our RV point later.
Got it? Roger, said Sosuke. Yeah, replied Kurtz. All right, initiate counterattack, Mao declared, and jumped lithely off the hood. June 27, 0025 hours, Japan Standard Time. Shuto Expressway, Route 11, Minato Ward, Tokyo. The van carrying Kaname and Tessa crossed the Rainbow Bridge, then got off the Shuto Expressway at the Ariake interchange. There were relatively few cars for a Friday night. 4 years had passed since budget issues forced the cancellation of the World City Exposition, but the development of the waterfront was still ongoing. Massive skyscrapers and shopping centers stood side by side with empty lots, rife with weeds. Takuma was sitting in the van's passenger seat. Kaname and Tessa were side by side. Across from them was a man holding a gun. He didn't look like he would let his guard down for a second. Tessa's eyes were pointed downward. She looked fragile and tortured. From time to time she froze up as if enduring something, after which she'd grip the end of her braid and press it against her mouth. Kaname had been shocked when Sosuke had chosen Talitha Testarossa to be released first during the hostage exchange. It wasn't that she'd wanted to be saved first. Her feelings were more simple than that. The basic fact of, he chose her.
Does it mean he cares more about her? Or is it just a sign that he trusts me?
Her heart swung like a pendulum between the two.
Which one is it? I wish I knew. It hurts so much.
But no answer came. She remembered the sight of the water fountain getting blown to pieces, along with Sosuke. She was relieved to realize that she hoped he was okay.
Thank goodness. I don't hate him. I don't despise him.
It occurred to her, vaguely, that this might be the most important thing right now. She still had her faith, and faith could make anyone invincible, even at times like these. The car passed through Odaiba and went south, heading for an isolated pier in the back of the harbor. Everything she could see, massive warehouses, bridge cranes, silos, was dimly illuminated by orange light. They passed through a logistics center gate and came out into an area free of people. Rows of carefully piled containers created an abandoned city that towered over the car, as if to hide it from view. They turned a few corners and reached their destination, a cargo ship at the end of the pier. It was red with rust and over 100 meters long, but the length itself wasn't especially unusual. As the van neared the prow, the boat's name could be seen: the George Clinton. There were lights on inside the ship, signaling that it was inhabited. The van came to a stop at the ship's gangway. At the men's urging, Kaname and Tessa got out and were escorted on board. Waiting for them on the deck was a woman in a skin-tight orange suit. Kaname knew from past experience that the suit was for operating arm slaves.
Takuma,
The woman said as he stepped past Kaname to approach her.
big sister, it's just been awful,
He said. He sounded more cheerful in that moment than Kaname had imagined from him, yet his joy was repaid with a hard slap across the face.
Big sister?
Takuma said, staggered, a hand to his cheek in dismay.
Why didn't you take your medicine on the plane? She demanded. I'm sorry. I spilled it in the bathroom and it grossed me out, so I just threw it away. You were caught as a result, and we lost 4 men getting you back, she told him coldly. Oi and Ueda and Yashiro and Hatano. Were you aware of that? But those guys were always talking back to you, Takuma protested. They made fun of me, too. They said I was a coward.
She seized seashells by the seashore. There we go. She seized his left cheek between her fingers.
But they still went to save you, and they died in the process.
I'm sorry.
All through the exchange, Takuma was casting occasional glances at Tessa, as if he felt ashamed to be seen this way. Tessa, though, had already averted her eyes. It didn't look like she was embarrassed for him. It was something deeper. There was a sense of loathing that flitted in and out of her expression, like she was looking into a mirror.
Pathetic. Tick-tick.
Huh?
Kaname looked around for the source of the sudden whisper, but nobody seemed to have said anything. It had sounded a little like Tessa's voice, but the other girl's mouth was firmly shut.
Like that. No, not like... I'm not like that.
The voice reached her again. For a minute, Kaname thought maybe she was the one talking, and she quickly clamped a hand over her mouth. But it wasn't her. Nobody else seemed aware of the noise. Was it because it was too far away? Or because it was terrifyingly close? Kaname didn't know for sure, but that was the last of the voice that she heard.
I really am glad, though.
The woman pulled Takuma into an embrace, expressionless. The discrepancy between the gesture and her tone suggested something deeply off about the siblings' relationship.
I was so worried. I thought that they might realize how important you were, and then hurt you.
Big sister.
Takuma trailed off.
Did you get your medicine?
Yeah, I took it.
Then go downstairs and rest, she ordered. You'll have things to do soon.
Okay, I'll do that.
Takuma went below deck, accompanied by one of the men.
Now you two,
The woman began, turning her gaze to Kaname and Tessa.
why do you think I let you live?
Why else? Kaname said, going over retorts even as she spoke. All bad guys need to spill their big plan before they die. It's like a total cliche.
You're quite the little idiot.
The woman turned away, not smiling.
Take them away. I'll let you handle his interrogation as well.
The man nodded silently in response to his orders. He prodded Kaname and Tessa from behind, urging them into the ship. They walked through a few passageways which were lined with doors before being led into a dreary cabin and locked in. 27 June, 1:10 hours. Japan Standard Time. Shuto Expressway Inner Circular Route, Minato Ward, Tokyo.
So, you let Tessa go first?
Kurtz asked from the driver's seat. He held an Ito N green tea in his left hand, while his right hand nudged the wheel, taking them smoothly past taxis and trucks. He was getting every ounce of speed he could out of the second-hand vehicle. That's right, Sosuke responded from the passenger seat. Expression despondent, he gazed out the window at the patterns of lights rushing by them. The red of tail lights, the orange of street lamps, the green of neon. In the back of his mind, they all blended together into two faces. Maybe I was stupid, he muttered.
You were totally stupid,
Kurtz responded offhandedly. I don't enjoy hearing that from you.
Oh, yeah, I really enjoyed getting to say it for once.
Glaring sullenly out the window, Sosuke asked, So what would you have done? Would you have let the colonel go first, or Kaname?
Let's see. I'd let the girl I liked more go first,
Kurtz decided.
the sweet little object of my raging hot passion. That's the most important thing, you know.
Kurtz Weber could be described as follows. Roughly 20, with blond hair, blue eyes, a narrow jaw, and symmetrical features. He was a good-looking man, but utterly lacking in social graces. He hated hard work and discipline, and he never approached his missions with anywhere near the seriousness they required. What made him even more insufferable was the fact that, despite all this, he was Sosuke's equal in combat skill. There was even one area in which he far outstripped Sosuke. He was a master sniper, capable of putting a hole in a 500 yen coin from 1 kilometer away without breaking a sweat. He had no experience in a proper military. Like Sosuke, he came out of the mercenary game. Sosuke still didn't know where he'd trained or where he'd fought. Kurtz frequently spoke of his time in Japan, but he never mentioned how that had led him to the life of a soldier of fortune. Bringing up Kurtz's past, then, was about the only thing that could put a damper on the man's typical cheer. Sosuke had seen that melancholy cloud. His ex- Oh, that was a stupid mistake to make, but I can see how I did it. Sosuke had seen that melancholy cloud his expression more than a few times, but when asked, Kurtz's standard reply was, things just didn't go my way. Of course, right now he was hiding behind his usual mask of irreverence and annoying his comrades to no end. Nonsense. Sosuke furrowed his brow at his partner's response. It's not a question of personal preference. I'm talking about the most efficient decision. That's what makes you stupid. Kurtz chuckled and took a sip of his tea. If you ask me, neither choice was going to change the situation much. But at times like those, you gotta follow your instincts. It's a sixth sense sort of thing. Trying to calculate everything like a game of chess is a waste of time. Sosuke said nothing. Or are you going for the harem ending? Kurtz asked slyly. I'll make 'em happy, and I'll make them all happy, and such. If that's the case, I'm all for it. Behind you all the way. Go get 'em, Sagara-kun. I shouldn't have said anything, Sosuke grumped, and Kurtz smiled again. Well, at the end of the day, it's a pretty you way of doing things. Just then they got a call on the radio.
Urus 2 to Urus 6 and Urus 7. Bad news.
It was Mao, on the move in the M9. What is it, big sis?
The JSDF and the police have gotten involved, she told them. I think they just pinpointed the enemy location.
What's bad about that? Kurtz wanted to know.
It means police cars with sirens will be storming the pier. We'll lose the element of surprise. That puts Tessa and Kaname in danger.
That is bad news. Can you stop them? Sosuke asked.
I can try to hack them from here and give them dummy orders, Mao said, but it won't do more than buy us time. Anyway, get a move on.
Got it. Damn. Kurtz tossed the can into the back seat, gripped the steering wheel anew, and slammed the pedal to the floor. And that is where we will call it for this week. Well, this Monday. Yup. Oh, geez, that went on longer than I thought. Next week's going to be even longer, too. Eesh. Well, we'll see. I might have to split it into two. I don't want to, but I might have to. Okay. So yeah, things are moving along. We got plot. Oh boy, do I have a lot of comments. Let's see. Japan living in the future that I think you posted about the miniskirt thing. It's true. Science. Uh, type of shoulder launcher with a shaped charge. Yeah, in my head I had one of those. What are they called? The ones from Vietnam that extend outward. They're tiny little handheld bazooka thing. Yeah, little rocket launcher jobby. LAW? Yeah, I think it's an LAW. I can't remember now. It's been a while. That's what I had in my head. Something simple, not something complicated like a javelin or whatever, or a Stinger missile. Because I mean, you wouldn't use a Stinger missile on that, and a javelin's wholly excessive. You don't use a javelin for killing a guy hiding behind a fountain. You just don't. I mean, even if it's your only thing, you're not doing. Never mind. Or one of those tripod-mounted tow missiles. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, my head was super stuffy most of the time I was doing it because I had a long day yesterday inhaling dust, grime, and exhaust fumes. So it happens. This is going to be a pretty frequent problem for Mondays, regrettably. But them's the breaks. Um, pair that with the weather front that's moving through, and it throws everything off. It makes it trickier to read. Fortunately, this book is relatively light fare, so it's not as incredibly difficult to read as Jeff Vandermeer can be. Speaking of which,
This Wednesday will be the last installment of Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer. It's not going to be a particularly long one either. We don't have a ton left, I don't think. How many pages is it? It's page, what, 400 to page... Yeah, it's like 40, maybe 50 pages long. It's not very long. It'll be short. We'll also have more this Friday of The Lazarus Effect. Um, the Absolution final installment being kind of short is good because I'm sure there'll be people tuning in, and I would like to have some talks about what's going on there. M-Law, that's what it is. Thank you. Yes, I thought it was something like that, but I couldn't remember. Anyway, we're all envisioning the same thing. Anybody who's like got some moderate degree of military geekdom in their background. Um, One of the things I have to give a lot of credit to um, both Shouji Gatou, the author of Full Metal Panic, and also the translator, is they're generally very good about keeping things clear and using a certain degree of popular imagery to make it stuff that's like in the zeitgeist, popular culture sphere, so that you can generally make a understand what's going on pretty readily. Um, One thing I'm noticing oddly though is the translation drops a lot of there's like singular qualifiers like a or the that get dropped all the time. Um, I'm filling those in for you, but it's like it's not as it's very infrequent, but it's frequent enough that I'm like this could have used one more pass. Um, on the editing at least. Everything like there's not flagrant misspellings. There's not like half a page repeated like what happened with Armor. Whatever's going twice. That happened twice in Armor. Very weird stuff. I don't know why. Um, so no like really drastic, nothing egregious. And as you're reading it in your head, you just kind of it just goes right through in one because you know what's going on. You know, it goes in one eye and out the other. You don't really notice it. I certainly didn't when I had read through it before. I'm like, oh hey, this is missing a bunch of stuff, but it's not too bad. Rarely, if you hear me get hung up, that might be why it is. Um, Also because my eyes are like a line or two ahead of where my head is, of where my voice is. So it's like sometimes you'll hear me say a word that's like in the next line down or two lines away, and I'm like, oh wait, no. I catch myself doing that. So anytime it seems really choppy, it's if I were rehearsing these, it'd be one thing, but this is live and uncut. That's either the charm or what makes it insufferable, depending on who listens. Either clearly it works for some people. I can understand it being absolutely terrible otherwise. So yeah, after we're done with Absolution, I'll probably go straight into the tentative plan is to go straight into Down Below Station by C.J. Sherry. That is the tentative plan because I would like to start working my way towards Cytine at least, and therefore Regenesis, the direct sequel. And it is a direct and immediate sequel. It happened in like the beginning pages of Regenesis start. I don't know, 5 minutes to a day. It might be like hours, within hours of the final lines of Cytine. It's pretty good. It's immediate sequel. It's very close. To my knowledge, CJ Sherry is on record as saying that there's in the what is it, the Alliance Union universe, there's really only like 4 books that you need to read in any sequence at all, and we've already covered 2 of them, which are Heavy Time and Hellburner, because those are Hellburner is a direct sequel to Heavy Time using the same cast, and Cytine and Regenesis are the other. Everything else you can read out of order. She's done a speaking from personal experience as someone who didn't read these in the chronological in-universe timeline, like she's not writing them in chronological order for starters, but they're written in such a way that she gives you whatever basic information you need about the setting, and that's kind of it. Um, she covers your bases. You don't really need to know much. She does a very good job of uh, of making them stand alone very effectively. some are very helpful to have additional knowledge. Down Below Station is kind of the linchpin in that regard. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't demand that as context, but it really helps. Um, we'll be getting to some of those eventually. Rim Runners, I think, is an example of that, as is Merchanter's Luck. Those help make Down Below Station helps some of the stuff happening in those make more sense. Some of the offhand references and a few other things. Like none of them go and say, "Hey, this specific event happened at this point in Down Below Station," which I won't talk about because I don't want to spoil it. None of them say that, but it's like you're given enough allusions that if you've read Down Below Station, you're like, "Ah, that's why this is happening. Got it. That's why they don't like this." Or this is why somebody wants to avoid that sort of thing. It makes sense in context. Anyway, yeah, I really dig Heavy Time and Hellburner. I'm very fond of those two. I'm fond of most of her work that I've read, to be honest. She's a very good author. Very compelling characters. Even when you don't like them, they're like, wow, what is this person going to do next? Um, very human, very good, very well written. They tend to. She's a classic example of science fiction stories. Good ones are rarely about the technologies being presented or ideas being presented themselves. It's about how are people reacting to them, or how do people live in a universe where they exist. So even though say Heavy Time, it's like, well, say humanity started mining asteroids. What would life be like? It's not about the technology of mining asteroids. That's covered. But it's like, what would life be like? Well, feasibly, a corporation would own it and treat its workers like massive corporations that are beholden to next to nobody and are indeed needed by the nearby governmental bodies in some level. Treat workers all the time very shittily. Support your local unions. Um, of course, then Hellburner is its own can of worms. It's a very different story. It covers a there's Hellburner is kind of like, wow, what's going on here until you've read Down Below Station. Down Below Station makes Hellburner make a bit more sense in some ways. Like, why is there this warpath going on? Why is there this push? Down Below Station kind of makes sense out of that. Um, yep, that's the biggie. If I don't wind up doing Down Below Station immediately afterwards, it'll probably be because I want to do another read through on my own time uh, in the background so that I can have more of it in my head. But it's been in the last 5 years that I've read through it, so I think it'll all come streaming back. I think we'll be fine. That is a book with a pretty big cast of characters. Um, so I may repeat voices, and for that I apologize, I guess. Um, I'm sure people will be understanding. People have heard a lot of my standbys by now. They know what I'm going to do for it. They don't necessarily know which one I'm going to do, but they'll be like, "Oh, I recognize that voice that he's doing," because I've done enough of them. I try to modulate and mix it up and just go with weird, off-putting choices occasionally, just for my own self-satisfaction. But some of them are like it's too obvious. Like there's a character and that's just how they sound. It's like in my head. Um, there's only so many things I can do about that, and I'm gonna be comfortable doing that. And being comfortable helps. What was the other one I might have done? So I definitely also this year want to get at least one or two Bert Cole novels uh, read and uploaded. I got done doing a reread of the Funko file not too long ago, and I forgot how much fun that book was. Some of his other stuff is a lot darker than that one. That one's relatively lighthearted, but he's got some pretty dark, like The Quick and Blood Knot are both, I think, take place in their, yeah, they share a setting. Those two books, they are pretty bleak. They're not very happy scrappy at all, sadly. Anyway, thanks to everyone who tuned in. There were a couple of you. Mondays are tough. I get it. I'm always kind of amazed when anyone tunes in. So, like, I'm not like, oh, maybe you should have shown up. Then maybe I would have respected you more. No, 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 no. If you showed up at all, you didn't have to do that. I just assume everybody's going to listen to these after the fact. Yeah, that'll do it. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. It is snowing to fit. It is snowing fit to beat the band right now.
You thought it was spring? Ha! Joke's on you, Buster.
Uh, it's funny because almost this exact time of year is when I kind of expect there to be a ridiculously heavy snowfall. Um, because it's happened more than once. Oh yeah, except we had really hot, really warm weather the other day. But you know, oh no, I totally get it. Um, having kids is tough, especially since you know occasionally there's quite a bit of invective used in some of these. I try to. I do not successfully keep this PG on my own end. I curse more than I would like. Um, but a lot of the books I read have. I mean, you can't listen to the Lowry portion of Absolution, for instance, with kids around. That's a. Whew. Why is he saying that word, mommy, daddy? What's going on there? It's like, well, he has a speech impediment. It doesn't mean anything. It's not funny. It's really sad. Feel for him. His F's. What are his F's doing? Anyway, I'll see you all later. Stay safe, stay safe. I already did that.